Exposed. The dark truth about an industry you use every day. Cruise lines. Man overboard tech exists that would drastically reduce the number of lives lost at sea, but it comes at a cost. The large cruise line I worked at wouldn't even consider it unless a competitor did it first. So, it'll never be implemented. Fricking nursing homes. I didn't think the worst part of EMS would be learning how most nursing homes in my area treat their patients. But it is, by far. When I was in nursing school, I did a clinical rotation in a bunch of nursing homes, and I'll spare the details and leave it at, please just end me before putting me in a nursing home. I thought working at a local flower shop would be rosy and idyllic, until I was told to upsell grieving widows on already overpriced casket sprays. My wife's a floral designer at a large florist. She went in thinking, yay, play with flowers and make pretty stuff all day. And it is definitely not that most of the time. Sorry for your loss, that'll be $1,600. Temp agencies who provide housing. It is human trafficking in all but name. The tomato industry. I went to a lecture for extra credit in college on the history of the tomato. I was expecting to hear how people used it and where people started growing them and whatnot. Extortion, murder, blackmail, vandalism, you name it. The tomato industry was rife with the worst crap. The margins on organic produce are crazy. Sell organic basil, not substances. An acquaintance of mine is an organic grower. He started the business back in the late 90s when small-scale hydroponics was starting to be cost-effective. But he only did it initially as a cover for his Mary J operation. Sure, he did a decent trade in exotic tomatoes, but most of his initial income was from the sticky icky. Then farm-to-table and organic everything happened. By 2010, he was only growing green herb for himself. He's still in business and 100% vegetables, despite the good bud becoming legal where he is. Got a nice write-up in a trade magazine about growing a chef the exact tomatoes his nonna used not long ago. The margins are better than selling substances. This is the one that surprises me most. The organic farmers market growers that I've worked with in my time didn't strike me as rolling in it. I wonder at what scale the profits for this thing really kick off. Without trying to dox myself, I worked for some time in Tallahassee, Florida's capital, and while I think that most people would rightfully think that the largest industry by employment or revenue is hospitality, what I came to learn is that one of the most influential industries, by all accounts, though official on-the-records numbers show a different story, is big sugar. If you want to learn more, I'd recommend going down the rabbit hole of how sugarcane is actually the most widely produced agricultural product in the world, and that Florida is more or less the gateway of the ongoing networks of the largest production network in the world, ASR Group and the FanJoule brothers. As recently as 2021 or 22, they've been connected to companies that used forced labor, basically slavery, which actually, as of 1800 or so, became an even bigger industry than tobacco, and was one of the primary reasons for the slave import to Louisiana, Cuba, Jamaica, and a few other places. So yeah, not covered much, but it has everything. Roots in historic slavery, ongoing questions about modern slavery, evil billionaires, the FanJoule brothers with a legacy predating peak communist Cuba, payoffs that destroyed American health thinking for years, environmental destruction, public health ruination, monopolistic market because most store options are just brands of the same conglomerate. It comprises the subsidiaries of Domino Sugar, Florida Crystals, C&H Sugar, Redpath Sugar, former Tate and Lyle sugar companies, and American Sugar Refining. FanJoule Corp. also owns a 35% stake in Central Romana Corporation of La Romana, Dominican Republic. And there's an estimated $3 to $4 billion in annual subsidies to US sugar production. Also, the biggest competitor to the above organization, US Sugar, is also Florida-based, so if you're wondering how or where or why Florida politicians have so much money, well, there's your answer. I'm surprised we haven't seen charity mentioned here sooner. Funding fraud, mistreatment and underpayment of staff, and focusing more on PR than actually doing anything of substance are pretty commonplace. The charities that raise awareness can go suck on an especially large sack of crap. Recently, a charity did a fun run to aid chest cancer in my local area. My aunt, whose daughter died of it, ran this thing, hoping that the money she raised would be useful to somebody. She raised a modest $5,000 herself, and the event overall raised another $55,000. Turned out the charity the money went to was only for awareness, with 5% actually going to help charities that deal with supporting people with chest cancer. Most of the money went to fund the event and the board of directors, who took a 40% cut of the proceeds themselves. Those percentages need to be on the front in big letters. Well, this'll get buried, but the aquarium industry is awful. The amount of death and fish we just throw away would shock you. On top of that, so many shops sell fish to people who aren't set up properly to take care of the animals. I work as a professional conductor. The competition is fierce. If you think academics are nasty, Herbert von Karajan was a media darling, handsome, charming, and talented. But he was also a single-digit Third Reich cardholder. When the Gestapo came into his rehearsal, he volunteered members of his own orchestra to be sent to those camps. He was a monster. We graduate thousands of conducting students each year, and there are about 100 major podiums worldwide. To get to a podium like that, you're going to have to do things that you aren't proud of and live with it. If you can live with it, well, that's another discussion. The politics, backstabbing, and mistreatment of others is a staple of the trade. The towing and tow truck industry, at least here in Toronto, where it's very territorial and well-connected. Like it's legitimately just organized crime at this point. Social media. They use the same strategies that casinos do to game human psychology. Chiquita Banana and any of the Banana Republic companies. These are companies that essentially bought entire countries in Central America. Bought, paid for, and own all of the local utility companies, and they control the government too. They're all behind a lot of assassinations to control these countries and keep them company-owned. Worse, they finance the paramilitary group AUC, which is the most violent group in the history of Colombia. They killed more people than the FARC-EP and ELN. Also, they got help from the military and government to kill civilians only because those guys didn't want to give up their land. I'm gonna say finance, but not for the reason most people think. I work in trading, and my colleagues are some of the smartest people on the planet. Former chemists, physicists, virologists, aerospace engineers, statisticians, material scientists, you name it. They all get burnt out, barely able to keep their research going, and begging for grant money. Then they get recruited into financial firms to do the same kind of work they enjoy, but get paid 10 times or even 100 times more. They don't have to deal with their customers, and they see direct indicators of the quality of their work. Finance takes people who could be changing the world for the better, and once they cross the event horizon, there's no going back. The other half of the problem is how difficult it is to get funding for research to improve the world, but finance is the black hole from which there is no escape. Real estate. I'm a copywriter for a US real estate corporation and can't wait to get the F away from them. Disgusting industry, but right now I need to pay my bills. It's kind of weird how used car salesman is the foremost negative salesperson stereotype, when real estate agents are out there being every bit as shady and dealing with much higher dollar amounts. I live in a country where there are really strict rules on the extent that these people can lie or manipulate, and let me tell you, those rules are needed, because they go right up to the edge, and while they won't tell you lies, they will say, "I don't know," when you ask them any number of easily researchable negative aspects about a building or apartment. I'm sure there are good agents. I know it's a stressful job, but my goodness, it's so hard to like them as a whole profession. So, what I'm understanding in this group of stories is that every industry is dark and sinister. Each and every one. So in other words, it's us. People suck in general. Got it? Higher education. It's become all about the money. Colleges took a major financial hit over the COVID years. To make up deficits, they're doing some very shady stuff to get enrollment and retention back up to fill seats and collect that dollar. They're doing things like recruiting standards falling through the floor, attracting students who have no business in college in the first place, instituting a no academic dismissal policy, like you can carry a 0.0 through the fall semester and be welcomed back in the spring. They'll ruin housing. They enroll more students than they have rooms for, resulting in triples instead of doubles, convert lounges to barracks-style rooms, and even put students up in local motels until they can find rooms for them. And of course, parents aren't made aware of this until move-in day. They refuse to expel students guilty of criminal behavior, at least until after the deadline where students would be eligible for refunds. They cut the resources of their campus police and security departments, so their ability to actually investigate criminal behavior is limited. They'll actively hamper criminal investigations so that word doesn't get around that there are safety concerns associated with overcrowding or crappy enrollment standards. And they'll fire experienced department heads who can properly serve students, and they'll replace them with people that they can pay lower salaries to. Finally, they'll cut support service budgets and freeze employment lines, resulting in manpower shortages in the departments meant to support students. And there's just so much more. Everything college administrators are doing is designed to pull a dollar through the door and keep it there, even at the expense of the security and well-being of the students they bring in.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius?
Film and TV production. Grueling 16-hour days and 6 days a week are normalized. Going months without working, 25-year veterans on unemployment, Hollywood egos and abuse towards production assistants and personal assistants, injuries and death on film sets due to unsafe workplaces. The list just goes on, with tons of examples in the news. But people still view Hollywood as glamorous and aspirational. Gambling. However sinister you think it is so much more than that. The art world, by which I mean the high-end institutional gallery art world. Gagosian, Mary Boone, a couple of other big names. I grew up in that world, and the amount of crappy exploitation that exists at every level would astonish you. I could literally write a book. My advice to any young artist would be to make art for yourself first, and to not chase mainstream success, because it is not worth it. I don't think there's a single industry left that hasn't been co-opted at least partly by private equity and profiteers. That's not to say that there's not good actors left in any industry, but there are fewer and fewer at least partially untainted industries. There's such a thing as big cranberries and big oranges and big maple syrup, for goodness sake. And no, not all cranberry, orange, and maple syrup growers are huge conglomerates, but some of them are, and they ruin it for the rest of them. CPS and foster care systems. As my mum, who retired from supervising welfare cases at DHR, used to say, the two worst things you can do for the child is put them into foster care or leave them in their current home. I know 3 people closely who were foster kids, and they all had similar stories that they basically were expected to be in their room while at home. All 3 of them worked a ton because that was the only freedom they got from their foster parents, who used the kids for government money. That's not to say all foster parents are that way. I'm sure most of them aren't. But the issue seems to be that the child was never alone with a CPS worker or given any space away from the parent to vent a concern. And as a kid, when you're not sure if CPS will take action if you say something, but 100% know the foster parent will punish you for saying something, you just shut up and you take your chances. Casinos. They set up the facade that everyone's having a great time, but they're experts in psychological manipulation, and they're taking advantage of every move you make. Reality is fundamentally manipulated at every turn. It's truly dark and sinister. There's no greater discrepancy on Earth than the people you see in the TV ad for a casino versus the people you actually see when you go to one. The music industry is hell itself. Whether you're a small-time artist or a star, music is by far one of the most dangerous things to get into. I mean that literally in every way. Financially, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm not religious per se, but people do have deeper selves and needs of meaning beyond the material world. And the music industry thrives on the total opposite force of goodness the higher up you go. Bizarre practices going back generations, the attraction of personality disorders the higher you go, and the prizes that aren't exactly fulfilling or meaningful the more you think about it as an adult. Cool, you get to be famous and have a multi-million-dollar contract. Now everyone wants your spot. If you do the wrong thing, weirdos know who you are, and that contract 9 times out of 10 is more like a glorified loan with major strings attached. Even the successful ones end up with mental health challenges because it just doesn't add up to an organic life unless you are truly built for it. Basically, you'd better be ready to fight on the daily to maintain your survival. There's a saying by Hunter S. Thompson, the music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. And there's also a negative side. Which industry isn't? Public libraries, they tend to be frickin' awesome and attract the coolest people as employees. And animal shelters, completely upfront about things, like, please take these animals or we have to kill them, these animals are rejects and probably have problems, and we need donation or we'll have to kill them faster. It might be a grim reality, but I never saw a shelter dishonest about what happened to the animals that stayed too long, and people who didn't care there. Don't equate shelters with farms or kennels, because those things are really sketchy. Excuse the narrator once again trying to squeeze some silver linings into a dark video, folks. As a dear librarian friend of mine told me recently, The public library is outside of capitalism by its very essence. It makes sense it can't be corrupted even inside the deep imperial core. Auto-towing. If they can't fix your car, they can keep it. There's no incentive for them to fix your car when they can own your car by not fixing it. Once they own the car, then they can fix it. Call center. Training automatic communication on the clock F's you up. I met people who were in the industry for some years and who had complete private conversations without remembering one word the person said. Not in the sense of forgetting, but in the sense of just not listening. Baby food. The crap that Nestlé pulled in Africa is despicable. I was a bit confused, so I did some research, and they are responsible for, well, a lot of atrocities that we can't say the name of on YouTube for fear of being demonetized. And they continue to pull this kind of crap. Nestlé is also deep into medical nutrition, like prescription formulas and feeding tube formulas. And they were a client of a warehouse I used to work at. The amount of shortages and recalls pre-COVID was absolutely unreal. It was always some kind of emergency crap show with them, and then we were left scrambling. I'd say sales, such as call centers and cold calling. Nothing worse than being told to hit KPIs and targets just to sell people crap that they don't want, sometimes forcefully, under the threat of losing your job. Been there, never doing it again, no matter how desperate. Such an unethical practice when you think about it. That's true. I worked in a T-Mobile call center about 12 years ago. People were calling in to try to reduce their monthly bill, but we were required to try to make a sell on each and every call. Of course I can remove some of those extra add-ons. Say, would you be interested in a monthly subscription for cute ringtones? Oh, and every service that customers had us remove counted against the daily quota we were required to hit. It reminds me, back in the early 90s I was reading tarot for callers on premium rate phone lines. We'd have a 30 by 30mm box display ad in a local paper, and people would call the 0898 number on it. I was actually okay at the tarot. Most of it was about putting people enough at their ease that they let you know about their lives. Want to tell the future? Find out about their past and present, barring lottery wins and car accidents. It's more likely to be more of the same. You synthesize something between the symbolism you see in the cards and what you know from chatting with them. Most folks call because they're just lonely or they want a bit of reassurance or reason to hope. Anyone with actual serious ongoing mental issues is referred to the right helpline. There was a public body set up, ICSTIS, that had a bunch of practice that said not to keep people on the line longer than necessary, and a bunch of other stuff, but there was a firm I worked for that had charts and league tables for average call length, and a prize at the end of the week for who had kept people on the line longest, scored the biggest number of minutes and stuff. Calls were allocated on a round-robin basis, but if you had somebody ask specifically for you, you could take the call and get those minutes. So the real rock stars cultivated a number of regulars who'd pay 50 pence per minute to chat with them. Many of these people are poor, alone, have no friends or family, and they're racking up £70 in phone bills, talking to basically flim-flam artists who are there to chat the hind leg off a donkey. I got out and went on the dole instead. The unemployment office wanted to pay me a much reduced rate for being voluntarily unemployed, but I gave chapter and verse on how these people were breaking the law and how I didn't want to be involved with them. I feel like since the Vince McMahon doc came out, more people are waking up to how messed up professional wrestling is. It's not just stupid fake fighting, it's a manipulative industry full of terrible people, with few exceptions, especially at the grassroots level. The John Oliver breakdown on that particular individual was so bizarre and eye-opening. Vince McMahon is a guy just ruining these performers' lives, all while publicly indulging his weird proclivity for being dominated and humiliated by other men. Real modeling, and I'm not talking about being an influencer here. I dated a real model a few years ago. Her agency put her up in an apartment in New York City. She had a pretty good run, but after a year or so they chewed her up and spit her out, in her words. Her look was getting old, and they got their use out of her. She ended up back home with nothing to show for it. That's when I met her. We were dating for about a month when she asked if I knew how she could get some painkillers. I was pretty shocked and didn't know why she'd be asking me. Apparently, while modeling, of course eating was highly frowned on. She and many others replaced eating with some other addiction, be it alcohol, substances, or other things. She'd get the occasional layout in a magazine, but she said most of her time was spent fighting off advances from slime balls in the industry. The next time I saw her was when I visited her in the hospital. She was having severe problems with opioid withdrawal. I really hope she's doing better these days.
The embarrassing era I wish you would forget. This is what our cringe phase was like. When I was 8, I had a leather jacket, a mullet, wore sunglasses to school, and insisted that everyone called me Razor. When I was 8, I wore a Hawaiian lei and insisted people call me Mango, but only during recess. It was because I was trying to create a tribe, and I don't understand why I wanted to do it to this day. I don't feel like I had one, which makes me concerned that I'm in my cringe phase right now. I thought white hair would be cool. I proceeded to bleach my hair into oblivion. A hairdresser sold me the industrial strength peroxide and was like, "Oh, just don't tell anyone where you got it from." It was so bad it would break like dandelions in a strong wind. I was in my 20s, straight and black. It was not a good look. I mean, I was getting close to Deadpool level of scalp burns. Mine's pretty standard. I was a metalhead obsessed with the concept of real metal and telling people that their music tastes sucked. When I was in high school, the rise of prank videos and public trolling were the hit videos on YouTube, so I tried making my own. My first video was called The Crab Walk, where I just walked around a busy town square doing a stupid walk and face that looked like a crab to me. I thought that it was funny, but years later, I watched it and realized that everyone thought I had a mental disability. I wish I had it so I could show you, but I deleted it shortly after watching it and nearly throwing up and pooping myself from cringing so hard. I thought I was a raver. I wore tons of bracelets, neon shirts with baggy jeans, but I was too much of a wuss to actually go to a rave. I just went online in rave chat rooms. I even dyed my hair pink. Frick, I still get red with embarrassment just thinking about it. Hating on everything that was considered mainstream, especially girls that tried to look good and were all about makeup and pop music. Hello YouTube and welcome to a new Minecraft Let's Play. My 9-year-old brother has just started this phase. I can't wait to show everyone at his wedding. Oh boy, well, I waited until my 30s to give that a go, and frankly, even though I wasn't quite a cringy 9-year-old, if anyone brought up any of those videos in a public setting, I would die. That wedding video is gonna be devastating, oh my god. Mullet and glam metal. Posters of glam metal D-bags on my bedroom walls. Frick. Wicker. I dyed my hair black and wore all black clothing and wore a big pentagram around my neck.
Oh, me too. For a short while there, I thought I'd tapped into some kind of hidden ancient folklore. How was I supposed to know anyone with sandalwood candles and GeoCities account could just make stuff up and put it online?
Well, to be fair, sandalwood smells amazing. I can see why you got sucked in. I was a weeboo for years. Between the ages of 12 through 16, I thought anime and Japan were the best things ever and obnoxiously pushed it on people and thought I was so awesome. It was awful now that I look back.
I worked at a comic store. I hated kids like you. Another weebo here. I'd say random Japanese words and run around educating people on the wonders of Japan. I drew only in anime style. I played only Japanese video games. I still like anime, but without all the cringe-inducing actions.
I was crap posting on various forums across the internet. Now I do all of my crap posting in one place. I never washed my face, had bad acne, and constantly preached about how little I cared what other people thought of me. Spoiler alert, I cared a lot. I was also a weeb and was seriously convinced I was Japanese in a previous life. I was 13. I unironically had a sticker on my shoulder bag that said, "You laugh because I'm different. I laugh because you're all the same." I was one of those, I'm not like other girls, girl with the crazy hair colors and the nose piercing.
Just like all of the other girls.
As a 13-year-old girl, crying to my parents about how no boys were interested in me, so I'd never have a boyfriend. I still don't get how my dad was able to keep a straight face while he was comforting me. He's awesome. I used to have this cheap trench raincoat that you buy all folded up in a bag from Walmart or wherever. I'd walk around in the hot sun with dollar store sunglasses and that thin plastic sheet of a coat and pretend that I was a character from The Matrix. I was 13. I might win this one. I was an otherkin for a year. Jeez, and now you all know I am submitting my answer anonymously. I was very similar. I was a furry otherkin, meaning I drew furry stuff and thought I was a cat in a past life. But I didn't realize it fit the definition of otherkin or furry back then. I was 13 and very into the Warrior Cats book series, and there happened to be a forest like in my backyard, so I'd run around there and pretend to be a cat. It ended the summer before I entered high school. Then my super hulark phase began. Oh, and also I had braces, glasses, frizzy hair that I didn't take care of, and exclusively wore sweatpants and fleece quarter zip turtlenecks. Fedora, fingerless gloves, Ghost Buster messenger bag. I've never seen Ghost Busters.
The biggest cringe here is that you haven't seen Ghost Busters yet.
The ultimate cringe here is that now everyone is typing Ghostbusters as two separate words. I was that guy who wore that one Cookie Monster hat and drank Monster. I was 9 at the time, my god.
Were you also a quickscoper on Modern Warfare 2 at any point?
I went through a phase in 8th or 9th grade where I deliberately mismatched clothes because I thought it was artistic and edgy. I really just looked like a dork wearing a flannel long-sleeved shirt, a no fear shirt with a pair of velvet burgundy jeans. I went through a semi-emo skater phase a few years later where everyone thought I was just a goth, but it wasn't even remotely close to the cringe of my 8th and 9th grade years. Hanging out with antisocial people, so I'd take traits from them, like always being on my phone and not going to any parties. Never getting a haircut, but at the same time not styling my hair. It was basically a bold cut-cross emo fringe. And being a music elitist. I started listening to hip-hop, but not really. The way I saw it, Eminem was the #1 rapper and the only good one. I'd listen to him and no one else. I thought I was so cool when I showed another kid Lose Yourself. Ugh. Hey, you remember that girl from middle school who wore all black, only listened to The Cure and dashboard confessional-esque emo, would only talk in sardonic half-answers or through obscure literary quotes, and generally had an obnoxious air of superiority that she thought wouldn't show through the illusion of depression that she put out? Yeah, we sucked. Former emo girls unite. I found obscure holidays, like Ferris Wheel Day and Brownie Day, and talked about them. I also, in class, would just toot and not even care, even if I ripped a really loud, smelly one. Getting melodramatic about everything related to a girl. Thinking my first serious girlfriend, who was a terrible person in hindsight, was the only one I could ever be with and my only chance for happiness. Even though 99% of the time we were together, I was miserable. Spending way too much of my time preoccupied with her, or missing out on other great things in life because I'd rather sit around and do nothing with her. I had this scene phase where I'd throw money at Hot Topic and buy Pikachu shirts and wear them outside. I'd wear striped socks over my school uniform, joined anime club with a bunch of weebs, and started talking in Japanese. I'm Vietnamese. It was so cringy, oh god.
I always pictured weebos as being white kids, or in my case, Hispanic. I've never considered other Asian people could also be weebos as well.
The narrator did a video lately that gave him the impression that the vast majority of Asia had a pretty negative outlook on Japan, at least in the older generations due to some conflicts in the 20th century, or the perception that Japanese people look down on them. But this has made me Google it, and it seems like Vietnam is a place where even the older people wouldn't give you flack for being outwardly supportive of so much Japanese stuff. Obviously, this is all generalized stuff that I've read on the internet, so feel free to discuss or correct me in the comments. It's really fascinating. Obesity and acne instantly made me the go-to kid to be made fun of. It made me so depressed I never did my hair, barely cleaned, and never brushed my teeth. I didn't want to do anything at all. So I became more and more disgusting until my body couldn't take it, and I became incredibly ill over and over again. So I started cleaning myself more, I started dressing better, and I started eating better. 60 lost pounds later and a fairly nice wardrobe, and I've become the silent kid at college campus who spends most of his time alone, gladly, but I'm going for a teaching degree because I love being in front of a crowd of people. I routinely wrote songs for strangers on the internet to make up for my crippling loneliness. What was my cringe phase like? Wait, you mean it can end? My cringe phase had phases. That's how bad it was. We started with the metal phase in 2008. With a musical diet that consisted of the likes of Disturbed, Godsmack, and Rise Against. I dyed my hair dark blue and wore only band t-shirts. I feel bad for my parents driving me when I insisted we listened to metal and I sing to it. Then came the nice guy phase. I didn't understand why I wasn't drowning in a cubic mile of women's crotches because I was such a gentleman. So I decided it was probably just that drove them away. The fedora likely helped too in hindsight. Moving on, we arrive at the oh my god so random XD phase, where Cheeseburger, with a Z, was the funniest website. Smosh was the greatest YouTube channel to ever exist, and bacon or rainbows or cat memes or a combination were the pinnacles of comedy. The fedora made a return here, oh no. I also only ate health food and shamed anyone who ate junk food because I guess I needed something to get above? More on that in a second. And then the everything mainstream sucks phase. I couldn't enjoy things just because a lot of people liked them. While I admit I still get a good feeling out of finding something that's not very well known, I don't go around telling everyone that the music I listen to and the games I play are superior to theirs. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My cringe phase was basically a sliding window. When you're 18, it's 6 months ago. When you're 20, it was a year ago. When you're 25, it was 3 years ago. When you're 30, it's 5 years ago.
And when you're me, it's your entire life.
You should stop worrying about how you were in the past and just remember that you enjoyed doing what you did. I used to love rage comics, and now honestly I think that they're the most unfunny, low-effort, and downright stupid things I've ever been into. But when I liked them, I had a great time reading them and I'd laugh my butt off. Your tastes will always change. What matters is that you enjoy what you do, even if you won't in the future. I was 14 and wrote emo poetry and nobody understood me. Oh, and I'd ask out guys by writing them love letters or Facebook messaging them. As a girl, I hit puberty and a big Nirvana stage simultaneously at around 11. I went to a middle school with about 400 kids and was pretty easily the tallest of any of them. I just grew like a frickin' weed overnight. I was this gangly, grungy, head-banging mess. Wearing all black, listening to emo music, and being deep in my feelings. I thought I could make a cool YouTube channel playing mobile games. I didn't really have a good computer to run games on, but I found a jailbroken app that can screen record games. It was very laggy since I didn't have a good phone, so the games always kept crashing in mid-recording. I still uploaded those damn videos. Also, the screen recorder let you record your voice, so I had really bad commentary. My voice was sometimes muffled since I didn't realize that I put my finger over the mic. I look back on those videos and, oh boy, I cringed so hard and I've just deleted them. Long hair parted in the middle and huge Coke bottle glasses. Flannel shirts every day with ripped jeans. I was really grunge. In middle school, I only wore polo shirts and had really ugly glasses. My hair was a mess and had braces. I then transitioned into the XD phase, wore those t-shirts that had puns on them like "Get Off My Grill" with a grill and food on it, and thought that I was so emo because I loved MCR? I was a hot mess, man. If you want to see photos of people sharing their cringy phases, check out the Blunder Years on Reddit. I was a wigger. Let's see if that passes the censors. I thought I was cool growing up around black kids and emulating black people. In reality, I just looked stupid doing it. Oh man, I remember the wiggers. I thought they were so dumb even as a little kid. Damn, son, you grew up in a rich suburban neighborhood and you get a sunburn from a full moon. Pull your pants up. I was that kind of atheist. You know, the one who looks down on people for believing in God. I used to think I was one of the most smart motherfuckers alive because I didn't believe in the stupid Bible and those silly myths. And then college happened. I met a lot of really smart, caring, and awesome Christians. I even fell in love with a Catholic girl, something that my teenage self swore never to do. I realized I was being a butthole for criticizing others over what they believed in, what they connected with, and what makes them feel like they have a purpose in life. So I chilled the F down. I'm still an atheist, but I respect other people's beliefs the same way that I like my views respected. Hey folks, I know that the narrator has from time to time ticked off a viewer or two by talking about some of the more harmful tendencies of organized religion, generally Christianity, but let me just say that this guy is essentially what all atheists or agnostics should aspire to be. Don't be a jerk about other people's religions if they're not harming people or forcing their views on others. Want to be edgy as F, born in the wrong generation, classic rock kinda kid. I think anyone who isn't into top 40 stuff goes through that phase, because classic rock is the next most accessible genre of music. Once I started exploring more genres, I broke out of that shell, thank God. Being thrown into a public school as a whiny foreign white girl who had friends that thought they were bloods. We didn't have any red bandanas, so we wore those generic red tea towels? Not even kidding, I hate myself for that. I wore a colander on my head to school because I was a pastafarian? I mean, this isn't cringy, it's frickin' hilarious. Wait, there are people who actually took the Pastafarian thing seriously? I like all music except for country and rap. I used to say that, and then I discovered bluegrass, rockabilly, and Johnny Cash and a slew of good hip-hop artists. There's also a bunch in the all music category which I don't like or haven't heard of. I went through an all-out Naruto phase. I spoke broken Japanese, I bought my manga collection to school, and I wore the headband in public. I like to pretend that I ceased to exist from 12 through 16. Where do I start? First, there was the edgy phase. Think stupid hair, fringe over the eyes, first a terrible ginger bob, then dyed black, the black jeans with an unnecessary amount of belts and zips, the black nail polish, purple lipstick and fingerless gloves. I looked edgy as heck, and I regret every moment of it. Next came the, oh shit, I'm actually an awkward nerd. Why bother hiding it under layers of emo phase? Wore a fedora unironically, lived off of Mountain Dew and Doritos, got in arguments on the internet with strangers over whether Star Wars or Star Trek was better. I've since ditched the fedora and nice guy attitude, but I'm pretty sure that the image is stuck with me. That misunderstood genius phase that teenagers go through where they try to act super edgy and secretly think that they're better than everyone else. But it's okay because I'm not like that. I am better than those kids. Sorry everybody, I win. Overweight, babyface, angsty, believed punk and metal were true music and that everyone else was an idiot. Self-proclaimed nice guy and that girls only liked D-bags, no interesting qualities and obnoxious as all hell. 14 through 18 was a tough time for me. I was 12 when Linkin Park released Hybrid Theory, and I fell in love with the album and band. I wore a bunch of clothes similar to them. You know, really lame workers' shirts, cargo pants and shorts, short, spiked hair. Granted, I was 12, but still. Giant weeboo. I was growing out of it when Naruto got popular, or I would have been the kid who wore the headband to school. It's not a cartoon, Mom, it's anime! Could have been the statement of my life. My phase was most of my 20s. I'm in my mid-30s now. I wanted to talk politics with everyone, regardless of if you were sitting next to me on an airplane or one of my in-laws at the dinner table. I'd ask questions and pretend to be interested in what the other person would say, but really I'd just be waiting to rattle off my own aggressively liberal or progressive opinions so I could feel good if they'd agree or argue if they disagreed. I just cringed into the earth's mantle while writing that. I'm still to the left of most Americans, but I hate it when I see people in their 20s acting like that because it reminds me of a version of me that I'm not proud of, and I wish I could spare them the cringe. I was an emo kid that wore eyeliner, straightened his hair, and wrote crappy poetry and posted it on his Xanga page. I think I'm in a cringe phase right now. I'm 41 and I found myself telling kids, by which I mean anyone under 39, that they've grown so much, or they look so much like their parents, or they should be ashamed they don't know Led Zeppelin. I saw the Struts at Carolina Rebellion and my first thought was that their parents must be so proud. At the same show, I also told a massive skinhead that he should be ashamed of himself for littering. I sincerely hope that in a few decades I'll give less Fs and be awarded entry into the maximum cringe phase of elderly butthole. I'd get on that social media app Path and DM all of the girls I saw on there, asking them why their Path account said they went to bed at 8:30 because that's way too early for a grown kid like yourself to be going to bed, and stuff like that. Mine was a, oh my god, I'm so random and quirky, lol, phase. It doesn't help that I grew up with the internet being easily accessible. My cringe phase was my screen names on AIM, by which I mean AOL Instant Messenger for you kids. Looking back on it now, it just screams regret and cringe. I used to wear my clothes inside out thinking I was cool. Oh, the teenage years. Middle school. Super quiet and awkward, boy crazy even though all the boys thought I was crazy, lanky as F, and oh yes, blue eyeshadow was literally my favorite thing ever. You know, for me it was probably my brony phase. I became a walking meme lord. That's impossible, most meme lords are too fused to their gaming chairs. Clothes that glowed under black lights, mushroom everything, and I once went to school with a pacifier necklace. Please, someone just put me out of my misery. In middle school, I was really into wearing the color blue. I even wore blue eyeliner with blue mascara with all blue clothes. Not sure why. One day I wore a red shirt and got so many compliments that I decided to branch out in the color spectrum. looking for self-validation in boyfriends, talking about doing the deed publicly, and posting online. I was a brony. I had that stuff plastered all over my room, shirts, the works. The dark side of working with the dead. Morgue workers confess. You know, if someone's been down for more than a day or two, they'll start decomposing from the inside out. If the room's quiet enough, you can hear lots of gurgling and rumbling as the gases and fluids are moving around inside. And then you move the body and they groan as the residual air in their lungs is forced out past their vocal cords. Honestly, I can see where the ideas for zombies came from. I work with a lot of hospice patients, so death is a common occurrence in my field. One night, when one of my patients had literally just passed, the phone rang. It was the daughter, hundreds of miles away, who had never checked in on the mum the whole time she was in my care. She sounded panicked and asked if her mum was okay. That timing has always weirded me out, because it really seemed like she somehow knew something happened with her mum, who near the end was confused and constantly insisted she needed to find that daughter. I work as a motor vehicle collision analyst. We get called to fatal vehicle collisions and reconstruct what happened or caused the collisions. We provide analysis and provide the courts with expert testimony as well. I've seen a lot of deceased persons and animals. I've seen almost every wretched way a human can pass away in a collision. However, there's one that stays with me every fall. In late October, I get called out to a fatal single vehicle accident. The driver was traveling through a shallow S-curve but going too fast. She wasn't able to negotiate the first turn and her vehicle enters into critical velocity. The wheels buckle on the passenger side and she rolls. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt, and through the first roll she was partially ejected out the driver's side window. Her skull was crushed between the outside of the door and the road, and continued to flop, partially ejected as the vehicle rolled. The skull was split from her left eye to the right rear behind her ear. This caused her brain matter to be strewn about the road and car. Her body was eventually thrown from the vehicle and came to a rest on the side of the road. One aspect of the job requires an inspection of the bodies to look for evidence. I approached the body that was facing upright on her back. The skull was very open and I could clearly see the inside cavity of the skull with no brain. The brain was deposited in chunks on the road and has a very distinct smell when you're experienced. That scene didn't bother me at the time. I was more fascinated than anything. A few hours later, I got a call from my wife just asking how the day was going. I told her I was on scene and I couldn't talk too long. She then asks if I'd be working late tonight or if I'd be home on time because tonight we were going to be carving pumpkins with the kids. Years later, I still can't carve pumpkins and the kids have no idea why. Oh my, well, that was grim. I don't know about you folks listening, but I saw that whole accident in slow motion from the way the author described it. Don't know how I'll sleep tonight without seeing that. This is a fun job, you guys. My wife is a mortician. She's had quite a lot of wacky experiences. This one's more funny than creepy, but once she was trying to break up the rigor mortis in a decedent's hip by flexing the entire leg up. Her grip slipped and the leg swung down, the heel cracking her right in the face, resulting in a black eye. She had to explain to people that she wasn't in a bad relationship, she just got kicked in the face by a dead guy. I watched 2 corpses fry with electricity. We responded to an electrocution call. A fault had caused electricity to be traveling down the stabilizing cables of an electrical pole, and someone had touched that cable and got shocked, causing his hand to grasp tighter. His buddy must have seen it and grabbed him. By the time we got there, they were both dead, but still being electrified. We couldn't safely approach until the electricity department cut the power. So we sat there and watched these 2 bodies twitch and spark. It was like a horror movie.
Oh, that's absolutely tragic. Here locally, we had a whole team of EMS get killed when someone stepped on an electrified ditch and water while they all carried the patient. If I recall, the patient was a drunk driver and had been fighting them. 4 or 5 people died, I think, including the driver. It was terrible. My fiancée died 6 days before our wedding. That morning, I tried to wake her up, and when I noticed she wasn't responding, I attempted to find a pulse and perform CPR. When I was doing CPR, she started wheezing, but it was only me pushing the air from her lungs. When I checked for a pulse, I accidentally had my thumb on her neck and felt my own pulse, and I had this glimmer of hope that I'd somehow managed to revive her, even though in hindsight it was really obvious that she had passed on already. Basically, I had my heart ripped out again in an instant when she wasn't moving or breathing. I'd only performed CPR in training courses, but never on a person, and I had absolutely no idea what to expect when pressing on someone's chest that hard. It's only been 3 months and no answers as to how she died. But now every time I wheeze, as I'm a post-COVID asthmatic,
The PTSD strikes and I relive the moment of finding my love and the mother of our child dead. I had a gig doing overnight transport of dead bodies. Think black suit, white shirt, black tie, unmarked black van, and my boss made us wear white gloves too. He wanted us to look high-end. Needed to transport a recently deceased middle-aged woman, who had chest cancer, 250 miles in the dead of night from a hospital morgue to a mortuary near her extended family. It had been a solid 2 hours of total silence when the corpse lets out a low wail. Sounded like, I just about cacked myself as I swerved off the freeway and sprayed out a rooster tail of gravel and dirt. Even though intellectually I know that it's just stomach gases escaping the body, I couldn't help but be a little freaked out. I had that happen when putting one in the morgue at the hospital. It was less than 20 minutes since the doctor had pronounced them dead. I freaked out and started unzipping the bag to make sure they weren't alive. I ripped the zipper open on the bag and it was apparent the person was dead, and the eyes were open. I was not ready for that. People who had been on blood thinner medication before they died can make a really odd scene. I saw a guy that had died looking out of his window, so he was discovered with his head on the windowsill, and there was this thick column of jellied blood from his nose to the floor. It was a bit freaky. Without the blood jelly, that's kind of a sweet, picturesque way to die. Well, unless you're the neighbor. I worked at a mortuary for a few years. We have methods to keep the jaw shut for viewing, otherwise it can gape open due to the angle of the head and neck. During a viewing, the device failed and this gentleman's mouth literally popped open. The lead embalmer was not on site, so I did my best. I ushered the family out of the room and superglued his mouth shut, but he didn't have teeth and supergluing his lips just did not work. It looked as if he were attempting to scream. I had to call in one of our other mortuaries in town, and that embalmer used a giant needle and thread to sew his mouth shut from under his chin to his palate. Here's a funny story from my grandma. She used to work in an ER in Puerto Rico. Some guy had passed away, and so the doctor came up to her and asked her to prepare the body to go to the morgue. So she got some sheets and started to wrap this guy up. As she crossed his legs, suddenly his ding-dong became fully rigid and was straight up. She wasn't sure what to make of that, but it forced her to have to redo the sheets. So, as she uncrossed the legs, the thing went down. So she was like, all right, let's get this over with. Then she crossed the legs again, and lo and behold, the flagpole went straight back up. Tried one more time, and then she got freaked out and went back to the doctor. Obviously, he found this hilarious, as the guy apparently had a prosthetic in his member. I was part of a search and rescue for 3 years. I was in the scuba team, so we were responsible for finding the usually dead people at sea. The salt water adds so much horror to a body. Not to mention the fish will usually start picking on a corpse sooner rather than later. My creepiest experience was trying to find the body of a Jane Doe who was missing. She was the victim of human trafficking. Turns out she'd taken action to end things and jumped into this rocky and sharp outcrop into the sea. We went diving in less than ideal conditions. It was low visibility and there were waves. My scuba buddy and I were looking at an outcrop when suddenly, out of the darkest depths, a deep blue hand emerged from this little cavern in the rocks. It began twitching and moving, and as we tried to pull the hand, the rest of the body emerged. She was being picked on by Murray eels, hence the twitching, which emerged with bits of person in their mouths. Her mouth was wide open in a scream position, and her eyes were gone. You could see tendons and bones in her hands, and the sharp rocks had torn her entire body to shreds in various spots. Her toes were mostly gone too, with some bits of bone sticking straight out. To this day, it still haunts me. The worst was pulling her out and swimming with the body as eels and fish followed us, occasionally picking on bits of flesh. I guess this is one of those videos where we bounce back and forth between dark and morbidly funny to absolute horror fuel. And this is the latter. Everything about what led up to this is just tragic. And that body sounds like the stuff of nightmares. Apologies to everyone for the tonal whiplash. Before COVID, I worked at a funeral home that wasn't particularly well run. I was a funeral assistant, and one of the embalmers was notoriously difficult to deal with. We'll call her AJ. About 4 days before this story, AJ had picked up a deceased man who had died of septicemia and who was to be cremated due to the fact that he was already in a bad state on death. So AJ had the brilliant idea to leave this gentleman on the rolling cot for 4 days unrefrigerated, figuring it wouldn't matter since he was being cremated and it was a slow week. Of course, I got the job of moving him to the crematory with AJ. We walked into the embalming room and found that the decedent had bloated and was leaking a grey liquid sludge out of his catheter onto the floor. If pestilence had a smell, it would have been what was coming from this liquid. It smelled like a warning to the base lizard part of my brain. To describe this liquid as smelling bad is an understatement. The liquid was something you could feel and sense in the air. AJ and I donned our gear, and luckily, since she placed him in a cot already, we didn't have to do much in the way of moving the body. Unluckily, the cot was relatively old, and one of the cot wheels had to be manually unlocked using hands, as the foot pedal was too rusted to effectively use. AJ told me to unlock it, so I carefully bent down and unlocked the wheel. Well, AJ got the bright idea to shake the cot violently as some sort of prank, sending grey liquid over the edge directly onto the top of my head, dripping down under my eye protection and mask. I closed my lips and eyes so the liquid running over them would stay out of my body and calmly walked to the employee bathroom in a sort of numb state of shock. The funeral home owners saw my sludgy appearance and sent me home paid for the rest of the day. Ugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The creepiest thing is the frickin' curtain of flies and maggots blanketing the floor of an apartment where a woman had been decomposing in the hot, late August and early September sun for 3 weeks before she was discovered. I thought it was dark in that apartment, but there was simply that many flies caught in the glass covering the light bulbs. On the ceiling, the floor lamp, the stovetop light, just every single light was covered in flies. The windows were dark with flies, dead flies, and even more flies than that on the window panes. It was a horror movie. She was melted into the couch. When we tried to pick her up, her spine just sort of fell out of the rest of her body, and she ended up in pieces. I guess it's less creepy and more skin-crawling, but I hate flies and maggots. Freshly dead I can deal with. Decomposition in and of itself is fine, but the sight of those flies was just… ugh. I'm pretty sure I threw out the clothes that I wore that day. I just couldn't. One of the decedent's grandsons faked a breakdown over the casket, and he stole all of her jewelry. Didn't take long to figure out, and a large brawl broke out. The jewelry was retrieved, and 2 weeks later the grandson turns up, needing to be processed and buried. Creepy as heck. My grandpa had a related experience in Vietnam. He was helping wash and prepare bodies for transport home under the direction of the coroner, who had warned them about the bodies making noises when moved. After a while, Grandpa asked the coroner how the body he was washing could cry. The coroner repeated the lecture about air being pushed out, and Grandpa said that he got that part, but how did that form tears? He said things got very busy after that. Grandpa's assigned corpse wasn't actually dead, you see, just suffering a lot of blood loss, and was very, very cold. The guy got 5 liters of blood, some of it from my grandpa, and then he flew home to spend the rest of the war recovering. I worked at a funeral home for quite a while. When I first started, about a month in, I was working a holiday weekend. Only people working were the transport guys and me. They came to drop off a body and went right back to it. I thought they were still there and needed to ask a question. I walked into the embalming area and this guy was sitting up on the gurney looking right at me when I opened the door, and it literally made me pee a little in fright. Turns out the transport guys picked up the body from an area hospital. He had passed away while in a slightly reclining position and rigor had set in. They couldn't flatten him out. Still the scariest moment in my career, even if I got a laugh out of it later. Not necessarily the creepiest, but the funeral home I worked for liked to embalm as soon as possible after death. I'd embalmed a man that was dead for less than 30 minutes to an hour. He was still warm and rigor hadn't yet set in. I just kinda held his hand for a minute before I got started. Human osteologist here. I work with dry human bones, so they don't do too much. But one of the times I've ever gotten the creeps was when I was handling a crania in the collection and could hear the wisdom teeth shaking around, partially formed but not quite erupted in the mandible. Wisdom teeth form at around 18 years old and erupt generally in the late teens or early 20s. I, at the time, was about 20 and my wisdom teeth were just coming through. I realized these remains belonged to a girl about my age, and that's probably exactly what my skull looks like. It really humanized things for me. Sometimes a fresh corpse will get shaky limbs. Makes it a real pain to bag up in a hurry. I got punched in the man purse by a dead guy. I used to work hospital security. Part of our job was to help with the 1080 assists, the movement of bodies to and from the morgue. I was on a call to move one, and the body's limbs were sticking out at odd, stiff angles. I attempted to move the corpse's arms into a better spot to shimmy the bag into the body fridge. His arm stayed in place for a moment, but when I released my grip, smack! Old buddy hit me right in the sack. I delivered pizza to a crematorium. A guy set down his pizza on the cardboard coffin to get money, and I couldn't stop looking at the box on the conveyor leading into the crematorium chamber. I pointed out, "Isn't that a little disrespectful?" The guy came back and simply said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He won't mind." Does that guy want to be haunted? Because that feels like how you get haunted. But I guess, to be honest, most jobs lose their sense of gravity as you become accustomed to them. And with a job where you're frequently exposed to grim sights, a sense of humor is probably something that's going to help you cope. I'd probably be the same. Attended a suspected fire once where we could smell smoke but couldn't locate the fire. Eventually, we did locate it, and when we entered the house, there was an old woman slumped over on the floor. We tried to turn her over, but we couldn't. Turned out that she'd been laid on one of the old bar-type heaters, and because the heat wasn't allowed to escape, it had burnt a hole through the floorboards, and the heater fell through the hole. However, when she was laid on it, her body fats started to melt and run into the floorboards. Then when the heater fell through, she had cooled. By the time we got there, she was one with the floor. Took 2 of us to get shovels under her to roll her over. It was years before I could eat smoky bacon flavor crisps again. I initiated compressions on my patient when she unexpectedly coded. About halfway through my first round, the patient pinked up, eyes opened, turned her head and groaned. I stopped and so did she. Turned grey and unresponsive again, so I started compressions again. She woke up again and I realized that the compressions were providing adequate perfusion to her brain so she'd wake up, but her heart wasn't doing anything. I had to continue compressions and shock my patient who was awake, groaning and alert enough to know what was happening. I've coded countless patients without a problem, but this event gave me nightmares for some time. Oh boy, my time to shine! I worked as a forensic technician and medical examiner's assistant for roughly 2 years. We were cross-trained in both autopsy and decedent removal from death scenes. I wouldn't particularly say anything was creepy per se, but some things were definitely gross and morbid. Going down to the satellite office in the south that was in the woods at 3 a.m. in the middle of a storm can be categorized as creepy for sure. You see, there was one HQ office in the state capital and a few smaller satellite offices throughout the state. However, I'll do my best to synopsize some of the creepiest things I've encountered, in no particular order. So first, the man who used women's underwear as a toilet or toilet paper. This was a strange one. 2 brothers lived in a would-be condemned house, both of which were severely intellectually challenged. One, however, more than the other. This was the most repulsive living situation I've ever personally seen. Black mold everywhere, the ceiling caving in, everything covered in crumbling drywall and water damage. Ironically enough, they had no running water. The only clean thing in the house were 2 pallets of baked beans and a Coca-Cola. The only thing these people ate were beans, and they only drank Coke, by the pallet. Anyway, we got upstairs into the deceased brother's room to find him lodged between the bed and the wall. That's not uncommon for someone who dies suddenly in their bed, in all honesty. However, what we find all over the floors is horrifying. Not only does the bedroom look like a typical hoarder's place, with newspapers and rank junk piled up beyond your knees, no, what we see is women's underwear spewed across the floor, each covered in brown matter. Not only this, there were firearms everywhere. Not like nice, well-kept weapons either. We're talking like old, decrepit, rusted-out things. The entire house was filled with them, hundreds of unusable pieces. The ATF had to come clear the scene and document all of them. It was insanity. The autopsy, however, was completely unremarkable. Then there was the man whose face was infested with wasps. This one was fairly unremarkable overall, with the exception of the fact that his face had been eaten off by a wild animal overnight. This poor soul was riding his bike through a field of cranberry bogs and had suddenly died. By the morning, his face was eaten off by a wild animal, and he looked like the Terminator. Some musculature remained, as did one of his eyes, but his lips, cheeks, and soft bits were eaten. Upon my arrival, a small swarm of yellow jackets had taken kindly to the man's face and were eating and laying eggs in it. We had to bug bomb the body bag before opening it to make sure the wasps didn't get into the morgue. Decapitation via high-wire tension. This one was a man who'd jumped from a bridge after tethering a length of high-tension wire to it and his neck as a noose. The force just ripped his head clean off. That was the first and only decapitation I actually saw on the job. Man self-deletes via taking too much of an experimental med in dental school. This was one of the most exciting scenes I ever went to. A, because it was being classified as a top-tier hazmat situation, and B, the emergency response presence at the dental school. In the middle of the major city for the state in which I worked, a dental student had decided he no longer wanted to be alive anymore and took way too much of an experimental medication. When my partner and I arrived on the scene, it was chaos. Police, EMS, fire, hazmat, the news, just everyone was there. We had to suit up in hazmat to go inside the school and reclaim the body, then get brushed down by the fire hazmat team and then clean the body in an airlocked pop-up tent as well. The creepy part being that nobody actually knew what med or cocktail of meds the guy had used, nor what other effects it might have had. So basically we had to treat it as if it was an anthrax infection or something. It was crazy. And then finally there are the two stories, of which I'll just let the titles speak for themselves. Man castrates himself and swallows it, and man dies via exsanguination due to sticking various objects up his butt, including but not limited to a guitar. 30, broke, and starting over. Which career could change everything for you? If I had no connections at home, like a spouse or kids, I'd probably try to get a job on an oil rig or cargo ship. See the world, you know? Radiology tech, crane operator, or just start a mowing business. When I was 30 and broke, I tried to get into medical school, which eventually morphed into becoming a nurse at 38. But what I've learned is the most important thing is to have peace at home. Making money and doing something important are false goals, especially if they come at the cost of stress. Everyone's important. There's no honest job that makes one person more important than another, so I'm not counting politics, advertising, multi-level marketings, finance, or things like that. Money is just an illusion that should be abolished anyway. I'd recommend a job that doesn't take more than a year or two of training, guarantees a union job after training, and doesn't rely solely on screens. One that's easy on your back, isn't fully sedentary, and gives you plenty of time at home. The medical field will always need more hands. Some places will even pay for certifications. I'm doing it now. I was a bartender for 10 years and had to make a career change. No degree? It's less stressful than tending bar and easier on my body with more money. I'm going back to learn PLCs and automation for manufacturing plants and warehouses. Our automation tech gets paid $50 an hour and picks up probably 10 to 12 hours of overtime a week. And he probably is on the lower end of what those techs get paid at bigger companies. The guy has no one telling him what to do or how to do it. He has all of the knowledge of the processes, so he really works on an island with only contractor support. Quite the job. I'm 41 and I'm going back to school for clinical psychology. The number of people who need mental health isn't going down anytime soon.
Yeah, but the number of bad counselors is going up.
I work in community mental health and with foster care, and boy, the low-income communities are not doing well. It's rewarding doing the work, but make sure you've got organization and amazing support systems if you choose that route. You could do private practice too and build up clientele. Either way, it's much needed and you've got this.
In this job market, whoever calls first.
Not exactly the shining lights of hope and second chances that I'm sure some of the people watching this video are looking for, but I appreciate your glib humor, commenter. Here's the follow-up comment. Yeah, I just accepted a warehouse job. It's far from my dream, but $25 an hour? Where do you want these pallets, boss? At least I don't have to deal with the public and it'll keep me in shape. And it's closed on the weekends and holidays, so nobody messes with me on my days off. Silver linings. Already been there, got my CDL, now I've got a pension for retirement too. Went straight into trucking at 21, and it only took me like 2 years to start making pretty respectable money. 3 years in, I bought a truck and then started hauling steel and eventually liquefied gases. I did it for 13 years and I'm so frickin' burnt out. I mean, granted, I always went after the highest paying work. I know how to get a real big truck through pretty much all of Chicagoland. I know how to work cryogenics and hazmat as well. I can haul cars decently and secure the F out of some janky coils or pretty much anything you can get on a flatbed, in a van or reefer or pumped into a bottle. But screw that crap, I would never do it again. I'm on the railway end of that spectrum in Chicago. I saw what the truck end had to deal with. It looked like way more stress, higher costs to get into, and very little upside compared to rail to go along with it. Even getting in and out of the intermodal yards looked like a pain in the butt.
I'm gonna be an AI!
Thanks, Ralph Wiggum. Nursing. I'm 32 and that's what I'm working towards right now. It's stable and the pay is decent.
I'm 36 and I just became a nurse last year. You guys have got this.
Do you recommend it? I'm a teacher rethinking his career path because of burnout, but I hear nurses burn out quickly too. The burnout is real, but the good news is that there's a lot of variety in nursing. I have a coworker who's very burnt out with working bedside, and she's just got on with quality. She doesn't interact with patients at all now. Medical positions that I didn't know about beforehand, but that have potentially good pay and specialized skill sets, are as follows: perfusionist, ultrasound technologist, registered dietitian, speech-language pathologist, or scrub technologist. I don't know how easy it is to become a device sales rep, but I've heard that job pays as well. Dude, I'm 45, broke, and I never started. I have no idea what I'm going to do when I grow up. I basically did this at 33. I was laid off when the business I worked at went out of business abruptly. I took the first job offer I got as I was desperate for money. It was seasonal work at a distribution warehouse. I didn't think I'd be there more than 4 months. Ended up doing that job for 5 years, going from temp worker to full-time worker to trainer to dock supervisor, and went from making $8.50 an hour to $33 an hour before a workplace accident ended my ability to do those kinds of jobs. The skills I picked up there allowed me to transfer to being an account manager for a security firm, making $85K a year before bonuses. MRI tech. My buddy's a rad tech and there's a lot of opportunity, but the pay isn't the best, it seems. I'm sure that it varies from place to place though. Rad tech is quite different than MRI tech. MRIs can make double that of a rad tech. 30's relatively young to be honest. Anything you like. It absolutely is. I started training for a new career at 40. I was teaching biology at a couple of colleges and universities, and I quit to go to medical school. It was easier for me to drop everything and go back to school than it might be for others, since I didn't have a family or mortgage or anything like that. But it's certainly still possible, even if you do. I actually have 2 classmates pretty close to my age who are married with kids. I'll be turning 43 in 11 days myself. Bike and electric bike repair and sales in France. This needs very minimal investment and formation, and there's now a huge market. People are buying those e-bikes at €200 a pop like they're normal $200 bikes, and they need the maintenance. I've got a friend who did that, and he did very well. Started in a 4-meter square shop in his neighborhood, only doing maintenance on normal bikes, while buying old bikes for nothing and repairing them to sell them for a reasonable profit, and selling e-bikes. He'd order these for his clients, not stocking them, and offer a reliable maintenance plan that people loved. He's nice and trustworthy, people love him, and his business has thrived. They're now 3 people, and he's moved to a bigger place and bought e-bike inventory. I tried programming. I got pretty good at it. Nobody wants to hire though because no coding education or work experience. Took 4 years to learn to be good too. Still broke, and I'm 33 now. Geospatial Information Sciences. This is a low-key, great field for a stable office job in a wide array of industries. At 30, in 2006, I went back to school and wound up with a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Physics. I'm now a physicist at a national lab and doing pretty well. If I had to do it over again, I'd make myself go into radiology in my early 20s. I have a bachelor's and a paralegal certificate, but I'm still stuck in retail. I'm going to school for medical billing and coding. I'm hoping I'll be able to get a job that will enable me to move out of my area to somewhere with more opportunities. Oh, I've been in the situation the title describes. It was a hard hole to crawl out of, but I had just started flipping items on eBay. Took the money I made and bought more items to flip. It eventually snowballed into an actual business, and I don't have to answer to some suit who's making all the money. Taxes suck and there's no safety net, but goddamn, I'm just so much happier. I get to basically treasure hunt for a living, and I work for as much or as little as I feel like. I always loved this idea, but sourcing products constantly seems to be a struggle. Where do most of your items come from? Oh, my ex does this. Online estate sales like Max Sold are pretty popular for people to do that. Right-wing con artist or meme coiner. Requirements? No shame. Professional napper. Perfecting the art of doing nothing. Controls. Pay your dues as a maintenance tech or millwright and build as much automation or PLC knowledge as you can. The difference between skilled and unskilled labor is a 6-hour course on ladder logic, and the basic fundamentals are applied in every single type of circuit that you see. Do you remember PEMDAS? You'll need that. As a controls engineer, I will admit that there's some truth to what you're saying, but it's not so cut and dry, especially the 6-hour course part. I was hired by my current company because they had 2 controls engineers on staff that couldn't accomplish the things they wanted to do. Both of them worked their way up from maintenance tech. They had years of experience and were pretty good at troubleshooting problems and executing basic machine modifications and installs, but neither has an engineering degree as far as I know. On the other hand, I have a bachelor's in computer engineering, and my skill set and abilities are a whole world apart from what they can do, especially in regard to data processing, robotics, and large system integration, just to name a few things. I started off as a technician at a different company before I quit and went back to school, and I know I wouldn't have my skills without my formal engineering education. Also, I'm 3 years into my career and I make $135K a year, while both of the aforementioned controls guys have been doing it for a couple of decades and make about $85K a year. That's still not a bad wage at all. Engineer has entered the chat with a, well, technically. And to be fair, it was a lot more interesting and worth hearing out than the well actuallys of the world. And it was actually a really useful couple of clarifications for people considering this. But some people may be willing to settle for the 85k and not having to go through a full engineering degree. System or cloud engineering. As the entire world moves online and onto AI, somebody's going to have to build the servers, maintain them, protect them, scale and grow them, integrate them with new tech. The pros all have a similar message. It's rough in the tech market right now, but our back-end server building skills will skyrocket in need and popularity as AI takes over. Healthcare. I was laid off from a remote IT job this spring, and my wife decided to look for a second job in the meantime. I applied to several hundred jobs over a couple of months of all salary ranges before I got an offer. My wife applied to 3 healthcare jobs and got 3 offers in 1 week. Supply chain and logistics. Been in the field for 14 years. It's diverse with the job positions and industries that you're able to be a part of. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? It's funny how many people think trades are a golden ticket. Trades are viable and important, but I'm guessing we're going to see another swing and it'll be a bit oversaturated, or at least more of a balance in 10 years. Good problem to have with the boomers aging out, though. It's not for everyone, but fire departments across the country are critically short personnel and hiring. It's an amazing job with a pension and benefits. Great schedule, too, if you can deal with a 24/48. I'd recommend it for every young person, gals or guys. I went through this at 27, got my undergrad in physics and astrophysics, then went on to get my PhD. It's now 10 years later and I'm a physics professor. I mean, happy for you, but that's not exactly the easy path some of us were looking for, pal. Radiology and X-ray tech. 2-year programs, always needed anywhere, and once hired, any new tech is paid for and trained for as well. Great starting pay and benefits, they're usually great in healthcare. You can travel too. This. My girlfriend is a travel X-ray tech making $3,000 a week. Every frickin' job pays in the 20s. Frickin' corpos, we're doomed. Hobo. Try that train-hopping life for a bit while this country tries to figure out what comes next. I'm 51. The happiest classmates I have are the electricians. And my class was no joke. We weren't the closest, but they turned out to be some amazing humans. From life-saving surgeons, White House, NASA, CEOs, NASDAQ bell ringers, most of my 300-something classmates led some extraordinary lives. I just feel like the electricians that I mentioned are on their feet, in a different environment every day, making enough to buy homes, cars for their kid, and all the big boy toys they could want, and living healthy. They are dopamine all day long. Proud of their work, they get projects done, always moving forward. It's a great life I wish I'd considered. If you want to make money and set yourself up for life, go for the oil field. If you can handle the work and probably more importantly, the being away from home, you can seriously make bank. Work for 10 years, and if you're smart enough with your money, that will be enough. If you're just half smart, you'll move up and make even more money. I started completely over at 41. I had child support payments and alimony to pay. I was able to make all of those payments, about 5k a month, and have money left over. I now don't have to make those payments, and I've moved up the management chain, and most of my time I love my work. I put 3 kids through college. Now 2 of them are in law school and 1's in medical school. I've got a college degree, but I only use it to say I have it. I just turned 60 and I'll keep working for another 5 to 10 years. It's not easy work. I went from white-collar management job to being the low man on the totem pole. If you really want to work and make money, this is a great career opportunity. Electrician's apprentice, with the night classes towards a medical engineering degree. Literally me right now. I just applied to car dealerships. Same for me as well. However, after 13 years in sales, I am beyond burnt out. If you're a natural extrovert and don't mind working extremely long hours, more power to you. I was a great salesman and made the most money I ever have doing sales, but as a natural introvert who doesn't have a large social battery, it was absolutely devastating on my mental health. The only way I excelled was through copious amounts of substances, which led to a serious addiction. Once I got clean, I'd been doing terribly at sales and I absolutely despised it. I'm now looking to pivot into something else, which I tried when I was 30 and it led to 7 months of unemployment, and since my resume consists of nothing but sales, I begrudgingly took another sales position. I'm 3 months in and I'm already completely burnt out again, and wish I hadn't wasted the past 3 years bouncing around various sales jobs and spent that time learning a new skill because I'm literally just right back where I started. I started over 3 years ago. went to soul-sucking call centers, jumped few times by relevant experience to better places, and now I no longer pick up calls. I currently work in water quality, conservation, and treatment. Going back, I'd do the same path of working in water. The change would be to go all the way to getting a master's in hydrology, to work towards being a hydrologist instead of stopping at a Bachelor of Science and doing technician and similar work. Commit harder and push the career further early, but similar things overall. Folks, please give social work a serious look over. Stuff is bad and it's only going to be getting worse. Every battle has many fronts, and helping the most vulnerable is one of the most important ones. Shrimp boat captain. I left academia and started medical school at 40, so that would probably be my answer here as well. I already had 2 degrees in biology, so all of my prerequisite coursework was already done, so it wasn't like I was starting from scratch though. If you need something with a lower barrier to entry, then nurse, radiology, technician, surgical technician, or anesthesiology assistant are all good career options that are fairly high in demand as well. Just depends on how much school or training you're willing and able to tolerate. Accountant. They're always looking for accountants, I swear. Yeah, as someone in accounting, I wouldn't. Dude, I've met 2 LA cops who didn't know each other. They were both accountants for Big 5 firms. They worked pre-Enron, so still had Anderson. They said being a cop in LA was less stressful than being an accountant at a big firm. Well, that's a damning indictment of accounting work. I perked up when someone said that maybe that was something you could switch to late in life for good money, but now I think about it, the 2 big-time accountants I've met were also just incredibly stressed-out people. I mean, this kind of happens to me. I have a bachelor's degree in economics. I graduated in 2003. I worked in the restaurant business until 2014 as a waiter, bartender, manager, and office admin. In that last role, they were paying me $11.50 an hour and had just given me a raise to $13 an hour right before I went on maternity leave. I already had it in my head that I needed to find a new job. I was about to give birth to my second kid. Paying daycare for 1 kid was already taking up almost my entire paycheck, so paying for 2 in daycare wouldn't have made sense at $13 an hour. I had experience in the food industry, and I was good with data and numbers. I applied to a data analyst and management job in airline catering. It was actually a great fit. It was basically starting over. The job was considered entry-level if you have a bachelor's degree. I started at $42K in 2014, which wasn't too bad. My husband was also making a little more than that, so together we made about $95K. It got us out of a hole of debt, and we were able to start saving money, even with 2 kids in daycare. Luckily, my eldest was going into kindergarten later that year, so that helped a lot. After a few promotions and job hopping, my husband and I make more than $200K a year now. A lot of it was just luck, but also networking and taking advantage of opportunities. Be patient. 30 years old isn't too late to start over. Know your strengths and weaknesses. I like numbers and data, and I don't like people, so no sales jobs for me. I'm now in marketing, and knowing what I know about marketing, I wish I'd started there. But you know, sometimes I think to myself that if I'd started in marketing, maybe I'd be somewhere else that I didn't like and making less money than I do now. Who knows? As a 40-year-old, I've thought about this a bit. While I generally like my little office job, I'd probably go with electrician. It pays well, particularly in high cost of living areas. It's stable. They're definitely in high demand and generally unionized. It's hands-on, but not back-breaking work like concrete or digging ditches. It's pretty cool. So many cool little projects you can make in your free time. And finally, it's useful in the event of a zombie apocalypse. It's like a 4-year apprenticeship and state licensing exam, which is a pretty reasonable barrier to entry. I feel targeted by this topic. It happened. I took my butt back to school, finished a bachelor's degree, went to law school, and now work as a lawyer making more money than I've ever made in my life, with more time off as well. Evangelical preacher. I want me some private jet and vacation home money. Take a job teaching English abroad. If you've got a degree, check out the JET program in Japan. They pay pretty much everything, housing, flight, there and back, and if not, you can do a TEFL course in Latin America and find a job. This option does require about $1,200 in startup expenses, though. When I studied to be a minister and realized I didn't want to work for the church, I worked at a Best Buy, saved up money, and moved to Costa Rica. Best decision I ever made. With the weekend yen and no career ladder, I'd recommend it as a nice break, but not as a career. Teaching English in Japan is largely symbolic no matter what age group you work with. And on JET, you're an enrichment teacher working with either homeroom teachers or English subject teachers. Although you might plan the lessons, you're supposed to team teach, so that alleviates a lot of pressure for classroom management and stuff. I did it while the exchange rate was better, and I saved a ton of my paycheck, but even my friends making minimum wage in Seattle are earning more than someone in Jet would at the current exchange rate. Chiming in to say, get involved in medical. People are always going to drive cars, so mechanic. People are always going to use computers or internet, so IT, not the call center crap, actual cables and routers. People are always going to plug up their toilets, so plumber. People are always going to get sick, so medical field. We're talking doctors, nurse, lab tech, HCA, and dentists. People always need buildings, so carpenters and electricians, although these are more susceptible to boom and bust cycles. Good luck! I'm pushing 30 and I just went to my school for graduate degree in business, trying to pivot into something corporate instead of freelance marketing. Don't listen to all the negative Nellies. Humans still needed to tell everyone which AI software to use, which HR issues to manage, and having a leader who knows how to manage marketing, well, that's rare. Some sort of grift, probably medical. Tell people you can cure cancer. No one will go after you. They might even promote your nonsense if you properly kiss butt. The scandal that rocked our school. What my teacher did to get kicked out. Mine hit a kid with a traffic cone. How about blasting an air horn into a deaf kid's ear and rupturing his eardrum? He was trying to prove that sound doesn't affect deaf kids at all. Middle school PE teacher fired for student degradation and hazing. He'd regularly require all the students to crawl across the gym on all fours, noses to the ground, while chanting the phrase, "Beep, beep, I'm a Jeep." I guess it didn't help that he was also screwing the language arts teacher. Our principal got caught breaking into a construction site and stealing wood to build his daughter a treehouse. It was too odd to not be true. I live in a small town, and it was a huge deal when it happened. We made "Got Wood" shirts around campus. I'd completely forgotten about it up until I saw this question come up. One of our gym teachers was furious and threw a kid into a trophy case. Woodshop teacher in high school showed us how to bypass the safety on a nail shooter and set up targets on the other side of the room for us to fire at. He said that he thought we'd eventually be safer in the shop if we, quote, got it out of our systems. And he got fired when two students decided to try and shoot at each other from opposite ends of the room. Who could have seen that coming? One of the history teachers at my high school got caught being real bad to her horses and also her kids. It made sense because she was a horrible teacher who liked to make us all feel stupid. They ended up catching her when she got pulled over for speeding while pulling a horse trailer meant for 2 horses, and she had 5 just squashed in there. They were all starving and mangled. Then the police did further investigations on her and found out she didn't treat her kids that well either. Pretty sure she went to jail. Mine lobbed a chunk of wood at her assistant. I'm not sure why. Did she yell, "Think fast!" Bonk. Nothing like a bit of morning wood. Well, that's our second wood-related firing in the list so far. It's 3 if we count the woodwork teacher and his haphazard safety habits. I wouldn't have guessed we'd have that many in the total video, let alone the first 3 minutes. Is being unhinged just a woodwork teacher thing? We'll see in the rest of the video, I guess. The nurse at my middle school got fired after she called my mum saying I was faking being sick to get out of school. Never even tried to take my temperature. She just said I looked over-emotional, so it must be that time of the month, or me trying to get out of class. I had strep throat with a 102.5-degree fever. Well, they lit a cigarette and threw it into a cup of gasoline to show that movies are BS. Frick! I'm a chemistry teacher and I talk about this every year. Literally every year. Students ask me to demonstrate it, but I tell them, no, I'll get fired for that. I also tell them about a chemistry professor who took a drag of an entire cigarette under a 100% oxygen environment. I can't do that one either. I mean, you probably could, once. It was after I moved away, but a friend told me that one of his students said something terrible about his late wife, and the teacher got really mad, freaked out, and apparently threw a chair or something. It was truly surprising because he was known throughout the school for being really chill, funny, and down-to-earth, and he was known as OBG, a nickname he gave himself that stood for Old Bald Guy. By the way, we know that he threw a chair, but I don't know if he was aiming to harm with it. He might have thrown the chair at the kid, and maybe that's why it was enough to get him fired. And this was at a middle school that also had 4th and 5th graders, so it's sad to think that it could have been a kid as young as 4th grade who said something hurtful. I'm not a student myself, but I might have got a teacher fired. I work as a restaurant manager. A few months ago, a host came up to tell me a guest was drunk, had grabbed her waist, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Good night, beautiful." The host was 18 and the guy was well into his 40s. Well, he came in again and I told him he had to leave. He wasn't happy, but I told him why and I gave him my general manager's card. He called. My general manager, the teacher, and myself sat down for about 20 minutes. My general manager gave him a second chance, which I didn't agree with, but it was my general manager's restaurant. Fast forward a month and he's back with some co-workers. This time he's rubbing servers' backs, kissing cheeks, and the usual business. I kick him out for good and let him know he's not welcome back. I don't give him my manager's card, instead I tell him I'll call the cops. About 2 weeks later, I'm opening the restaurant and I'm getting texts, phone calls, and stuff. The guy's a teacher at a local school and he's been busted for just very inappropriate behavior with people at his school. I think the way he was acting in front of other teachers at the restaurant when I 86'd him, well, they probably finally put 2 and 2 together and it all clicked for them. I don't think he was fired, but he was placed on indefinite medical leave. I had a professor have a full-on psychotic break in the classroom because he lost all of his money in a fraudulent pension investment scheme. That poor man. This was the principal group scandal in the 80s, I think. Something like that happened to my uncle. His professor continued to teach an hour after class was supposed to end, and he'd yell at anyone who tried to leave. After that, the head of the department taught the last few classes. My uncle still doesn't know what caused that professor to break. They went through a midlife crisis, came to work drunk, and sideswiped another faculty member's car before heading to the classroom to teach. This is a substitute teacher story. My brother once had a substitute teacher for one of his classes in junior high, and my brother said the guy looked like someone they'd pulled off the streets and stuck in a classroom. He had grease stains all over his shirt and tie, and he called a female student the B word. He then saw that one of the male student's shoes was untied during class and told him to tie his laces or go to the office. The student went to the office, and the administrators finally got involved after multiple complaints. The teacher was also taking pictures of the students who misbehaved, and this was in 1999, so he had a disposable camera. From what I do remember, they had to call the cops and have him escorted off campus. Doing a bunch of white snow off of his desk before first period. I mean, that's the best part of waking up. Don't take that away from him. I didn't know teachers could afford crazy substance habits. I guess it's amazing what you can afford because you don't eat. This was a substitute, but I still think it's a relevant story. He subbed for our math teacher during a big test that the majority of our class didn't study for. 3 or 4 people were ready, and he knew it just by looking at the class. The teacher had given him instructions to remove 1 point from a 30-mark test for every time someone asked for a formula that we were supposed to know. He wasn't supposed to tell us this, and still wasn't even once someone asked for one, to just silently deduct a point up to a max of 10, or 33% of the test. Everyone protested the test, asking for another day, so he texted the teacher. The teacher said to just administer the test. We knew it was going to be on that day, so we had no excuses. This mother-frickin' legend chose not to give the tests, and instead spent the day teaching the people who didn't remember the formulas mnemonics for memorizing them. At the end of the day, he joked about that day being the last time he worked, and most of the people in class didn't realize he wasn't kidding. He lost his job after the school board fired him for failing to properly substitute. The math teacher had him reinstated, but it still doesn't change the fact that he risked his job just so that people wouldn't fail the class. Frickin' legend. And by the way, he looked like Mike Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad. An English teacher at my high school was arrested for taking too much of something, some say Xanax, and breaking into his neighbor's house to make soup. The neighbor woke up at like 3 a.m. from the noise and called the cops, thinking it was a robber. Once they found out it was their neighbor, they understood the situation and weren't too worried because apparently the English teacher was always getting wild. He was, however, found undressed, sitting on the couch eating the now warm soup. He probably would have gotten fired, but everyone liked him, so instead he was put on leave and sent to teach at a school for delinquent kids. I mean, ours was fired when they threw a desk at a student. Holy crap, this happened in one of my college classes. I was brought in as a witness to the event during his disciplinary hearings before the department head, and heard the most incredible exchange of testimony. The department head asked him, "Professor, is it true that you hit the student with a desk?" And he answered, "Well, no, I missed." Oddly enough, he wasn't fired for the desk incident. He was fired later in the year when he took out a knife and violently pinned a student's homework paper to a wall. Wow. Tenure really is a powerful thing, isn't it? You would have thought that throwing a desk and being openly smarmy about it would have been enough. But it turns out it was excessive brutality to stationery that did it in the end. Mr. Keegan. God, I loved that grumpy old Irishman. I went to a very small Catholic school, like there were 23 students in my graduating class, kinda small. Mr. Keegan was a retired cop. He was a hoot. Very brash and husky, really tall. A total good old boy. He was great. Hilarious. He got fired after Sister Mary Margaret found out that he kept a weapon in a locked drawer in his desk. When she told him that was unacceptable, he said, "Well, what are you going to do if a madman with a firearm comes into the school? Hold up your rosary and pray at him?" She singled out all of the kids she thought had a disability, including myself, and she gave them extra homework. In an ironic twist, when we had a school meeting and the headmaster announced the Special Olympics swimming tourney results, and when everyone, except those mentioned in the results, gave pity-filled, "I'm going to look like a jerk if I don't applaud, so I guess I have to," claps, she stood up and gave loud hollers and whoops, and continued to even after the headmaster asked her to settle down. The frickin' woman was a nutcase. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Our teacher was fired for working nights at an exotic dance club.
Well, at least she got to keep the higher-paying job.
Okay, I don't think he was actually fired for it, but one teacher climbed the tree the cool kids used to smoke under at break time. When the kids came out for lunch and all huddled under the tree, he jumped out like Spider-Man and scared them all. Our religious education teacher left the profession after she flipped out and slammed a sleeping kid's head on his desk. She was really intense about people putting in effort in her class despite the fact it wasn't graded. She then became a minister for the Church of Scotland. A student teacher in my high school for photography class. He brought in his camera for us to use. One of the girls in my class was using it and was going through the photos she took, started scrolling, and noticed a picture of a male member. When the student teacher noticed, he said, "Oh, whoops, let's just keep that a secret between us." This girl was mortified. Fair enough. He gave us the same worksheet every day, and I'm not exaggerating one bit. He also let kids walk all over him. But he was a coach of an Olympic bobsled team. My Spanish teacher in high school was a fresh-out-of-college sorority girl, and she was really hot and fun and outgoing. Every guy flirted with her, but she kept it professional and ignored them. Well, since she was just out of college, she obviously went to bars, parties, and drank. She ended up going to a college party and was just having fun doing beer bongs and dancing, and one of the seniors saw her and started recording her partying. It's a small-town high school, and that video was seen by everyone. The principal found out and he let her finish the school year, and she got fired. It's kinda sad, because she made learning fun. She protested standardized testing at our middle school. These tests took up a whole school week and didn't teach anyone anything, so she started informing students and parents and told them they should protest by not participating. The superintendent got wind of it and gave her an ultimatum. Stop your crusade or lose your job. She opted for the latter. I still think about you, Miss Miller. The link for her adult content website got leaked. This one teacher at my school claimed that he couldn't feel pain. To prove this, he cut a long slice in his arm and then stapled it back together using a literal stapler. As if that's not bad enough, he then poured hand sanitizer all over the wound. This was in front of a whole class, mind you. Nowadays, he's in an institution. Some 6th graders caught our physical ed teacher peeking at them in the locker room through a mirror while they changed. All he had to do was stand at the door to the locker room. The mirror was in such a spot to allow him to see everything from the door. Needless to say, they removed that mirror shortly after he was caught. Well, he wasn't fired, but strongly encouraged to leave is what he told us. He'd thrown in a razor at a student because she wasn't paying attention. He was an AG teacher, and her parents were some of the top contributors to the school's FFA program, so it caused a big fuss. Doesn't sound like a big deal on his own, but the problem was that everyone else had gripes about him, and once this happened, it sort of opened the floodgates. Admittedly, the guy was an absolute jerk and should have been fired for the way he allowed his shop to be run. We had hoses in the shop for blowing sawdust and whatnot onto the floor to sweep. He taught some of the rougher kids how to stick a welding electrolyte into one of them and shoot them at people. One of those meatheads hit me in the arm and it drew blood. Still, it felt kind of crappy that it went down like that. He works at a juvie now, so I sometimes wonder how that's going. Well, they failed 95% of their students. Hey, that happened at my school too. We were all sent to summer school, and it was so bad that our principal decided to erase our grade during the year and replace it with the grade from summer school. Most of us easily passed, which showed how much of a jerk the teacher was. The drama teacher got fired as he essentially forced kids who wanted good roles in plays to go on dates with his favorite students. He also had the kids perform some pretty adult plays. All of the people involved, aside from him, were high school students under 18. Yikes. When I was in junior high, a teacher of mine had one of those long mini ponytails. He frequently spoke very proudly of it and said it embodied his journey in his religion. One day, when the teacher was helping a student, another student came up behind him in class and cut off the teacher's ponytail. Needless to say, the teacher became enraged and then unfortunately proceeded to beat the ever-loving snot out of that guy. He threatened to throttle a particularly annoying student while he was with his mum on the phone. His mum heard and freaked out. This was just the kind of thing he'd say, so I'm not exactly sure if the mother was justified or not. What I'm more confused about is that he once threw an open X-Acto knife right in front of the same student, but that didn't get him in trouble somehow. I think this video could be renamed Teachers Who Finally Gave In to Their Intrusive Thoughts. Alternatively, teachers who did what every teacher has ever dreamed of doing. I'm not condoning their actions, to be clear, but I'm sure that it wouldn't be too much of an exaggeration. She found herself pregnant after she had a big fight and breakup with her much younger, immature, jobless boyfriend. The fighting and breakup drama had happened so many times, even occurring on school grounds on multiple occasions, and they got back together and got married because of it. A few months later, during lunchtime, she was eating with some students, and her husband suddenly showed up, accusing her of having an affair with one of the students, and just started getting real rowdy, throwing chairs and stuff. The police got involved. Then the husband kept showing up while she worked, refused to find a job, and followed her everywhere. She divorced the husband not long after that, but he continued. She wasn't fired, but management talked her into resigning. So she was pregnant, lost her job, had no income, no paid maternity leave because of that husband. She's doing great now, and I'm happy for her. I didn't have any of his classes, thank God, but this subject-filling teacher at our middle school got caught in a nationwide major league match-fixing scandal, after which he repeatedly showed up to work drunk. He didn't last long. The principal. He got caught lying about being a Navy SEAL. The grade 6 English teacher pushed a kid down the stairs. A student accused a teacher who'd been there for over 40 years of doing some pretty obscene stuff right before her entrance exams. The accusations were investigated and were completely unfounded, but the actions of the school were even worse. They kept him in the dark for 2 months after the investigation was completed and were refusing to allow him back because of their insurance. Then a campaign was launched by a bunch of alumni, and he finally got back to teaching until his death a few years ago. He was a great guy, too. I had him for a political theory class, and he was really nice. He and his wife, aside from having children of their own, took in foster kids all the time. A year after I graduated high school, the new physics teacher was trying to show off to a bunch of kids. The guy took a bucket of liquid nitrogen, and like any cool guy, he froze a whole bunch of stuff. We're talking food and plants. To end it off, he wanted to show how even though liquid nitrogen is really cold, it boils off really fast so you don't have to be afraid of it. So, instead of throwing the liquid nitrogen into the audience like a circus clown would with a bucket of glitter, he walked over to one of the students and poured it into her lap. She had to be rushed to the emergency room to treat the burns. Suffice to say, he didn't come back after that. Here is a list of the fired teachers in my school. 1. Using his iPad to video up a lady's skirt at Walmart. He was the special ed teacher. 2. Working a second job as a waitress. And 3. Having an obscure nose or ear piercing that small-town Arizona did not approve of. And here are the ones who aren't fired. The gym teacher who was caught drunk Facebook messaging his students. He had a secure job. And second, the coach who was known for hooking up with people after they graduated. Ugh. One student drew a male member on the board, so she made everyone draw one in order to compare them and find the culprit. He was a pretty laid-back teacher who was just out of college, so put that with a bunch of teen girls, and with that you'll find many rumors that he'd engaged in inappropriate behavior with a lot of his students. I don't think any of that was true, by the way. Gave a student poor grades. Her parents complained massively to the administrators. This was probably like 15 years ago. As a side note, that student got arrested earlier this year for shooting someone. Grade 7. Social Studies during the history of World War II. The teacher was brand new and the first thing she said was, "The atrocities of the Third Reich against the Jewish people are a lie. Don't believe anything else." First time I got kicked out of a class for telling the teacher she was fricking nuts. Our school was run by an organized crime substance trafficking ring in the church. A female teacher in her 20s was fired for spying on the principal. The school was public. The principal's house was arsoned and he disappeared. The teacher was fired for having unruly students, but she was really undercover? Ours was arrested for embezzling money from the band booster funds to pay for a gambling addiction. 2 music teachers, both of them dearly loved by all the students, and both young and attractive, and both married, had an affair. In fact, a student had forgotten her instrument in the orchestra room on a Friday night and came back with her friends after cajoling the janitor to let her in so that she could practice all weekend. They walked in on both teachers doing the deed. Each of them cried and gave heartfelt speeches to their classes before they were forced to leave. I realized their spouses are the victims here, but everyone thought it was so romantic because they were so sweet and kind, and all of us could see the chemistry between them when they sang or played instruments and looked at each other. Well, ours slapped a kid. I should say that kid definitely deserved it, but I suppose that's besides the point. Dumbest main character ever? The films that prove bad decisions make blockbusters. The visit. The kids go, "We're going to visit our grandparents." "Well, I don't want you to go, but if you really feel like you want to go, I'll drive you to their houses." And then the mum could go, "Hey, you're not my parents, I'm calling the police." The end. I can't stand that the mother didn't apologize once in the movie for just leaving her kids with 2 crazy murderers. The Ring. "Hey, do you want to watch that tape that kills you in 7 days?" No thanks. Roll credits. 13 Reasons Why. The frickin' kid just couldn't listen to the damn tapes. It's literally the first thing she tells him. It's what everyone repeats to him a million times. He runs around asking people stuff instead of listening to the tapes. I mean, I feel like Dorothy should have asked a few more questions about the ruby slippers. There goes another one. Hold your fire, there's no life forms aboard. Dude, we're looking for an inanimate set of plans in a galaxy full of sentient robots. Oh, right. Written and directed by George Lucas. How about a Jurassic Park where Hammond actually spared no expense? Even after he says the line, "spared no expense," it's followed 15 minutes later by, "I told you how many times we need locking mechanisms on the vehicle doors." I mean, how the frick do you have a T-Rex, but not locks on the car doors in your dinosaur park? Reservoir Dogs. I don't know, Joe. This heist seemed kinda risky and dangerous. Yeah, I'm not actually sure everyone in this crew is on the up and up. Alright, let's call it off. Over the Hedge. RJ decided to be a dum-dum and steal all of the bear's food. Like, what did he think would happen even if he didn't accidentally wake him up? The bear would have still woken up a week later and probably would have known it was RJ. Although, I suppose if RJ never stole the food, he'd still be a con man, and the forest animals likely would have starved to death that year. So, dang, I haven't heard someone reference Over the Hedge in years. Breaking Bad would have worked out much better for Walt if it just swallowed his pride and allowed his old friend to pay for his treatment. I know, right? My rich friend will pay for everything and all I have to do is play Candy Crush and eat Pop-Tarts. But you know what? I'm gonna make crystal and kill people instead. I mean, it's true, but the whole point of it is that Walter is prideful and hates how weak and unmanly he is. His cancer is just a means to expose that, and the rest of the show is him being increasingly awful to try and feel good about himself, so it fits with the character. And I think we're actually going to see a lot of that in other people's answers, to be honest. I'd kind of accepted that Walter's pride was the reason for him not accepting the money, but I kind of never extrapolated him hating himself as part of the reason for that pride. That's a really good reading of the show. Thanks for your input. Okay, back to the idiots. Aladdin. If Jafar had just paid Aladdin what he promised him instead of betraying him at the cave, he would have had the lamp and become the king and been mighty and powerful. Aladdin just wanted his money in return for the lamp. For real, it's not like Aladdin would have been able to do anything about Jafar using the lamp, right? But no, Jafar is the basest sort of villain. He's a lowly troll. He simply can't resist an opportunity to screw someone over for his own sadistic amusement, even when it's directly counterproductive. He wasted time trying to get Aladdin to give up on his only leverage when he could have just pulled the man up and completed the deal. No Country for Old Men. Never go back to the scene of the crime. Also, if you find a duffel bag full of cash and decide to keep it, check it for tracking devices. How about take the cash and leave the duffel bag? Now Llewellyn and Carla are living comfortably in an isolated Idaho ranch they paid cash for. Look, I'm aware the tracker was in a wad of cash. In my version, Moss leaves that stack in the truck with the dead guy. Quit ruining my fantasy of the Mosses living happily ever after. Don't reopen the beach for the holiday weekend in Jaws. Any horror movie where your friends are dying one by one. After the third one, you say, screw it, and you leave. Wait, the third? After one death, I'm out of there and not coming back without the cops. You maniac! Any movie where the main character says there's no time to explain. This made me think of The Princess Bride. Let me explain. No, there's too much. Let me sum up. Such a good movie. I suppose a summation is good enough. In 50 Shades of Grey, Anna should just say, "You're a stalker with serious emotional trauma. Seek help." Star Wars Episode 1. Padme could have bought Anakin's mum, and he probably would have never turned to the dark side. Republic credits might not be worth much on Tatooine, but I'm sure one of her jewel-encrusted headdresses is. Or if anyone had asked Anakin how he was doing, and if he wanted to talk. But the story of the prequels is essentially, the old Jedi were stupid and kind of deserved it. If Mr. and Mrs. Bueller were anything like my parents, the movie would have been called Ferris Bueller's Day at School. If they were anything like my parents, they would have called my bluff, taken me to the doctor's office, and found out, to my own surprise as well, that I had bronchitis. Forget the movies, How I Met Your Mother took 9 years for a 5-minute story. Kids, I was at a wedding and your mom was the bass player. The end. Oh, and that wedding? Anne Robbins. I'd like to do it with her again. Is that cool with you guys? Isn't this all so serendipitous? Pretty much anything on the Hallmark Channel. Wait, let me explain. Batman Begins. The Waynes shouldn't have left through the side exit of the theater. Just call Alfred and wait out front. Hire a driver to pick you up at the entrance like every other elite rich person. John Wick. If Theon could have just killed John, considering they messed him up pretty bad, not only would we not have gotten 3 movies, but Theon would have been known as the person who killed Baba Yaga. Being the son of a crime lord and worldwide recognition for killing the most famous assassin on the planet would make the Tazarov family untouchable. Hi, is the car for sale? No. Where did you buy it? I'm a mobster's son with a literal bottomless checkbook. Murray's Classic Vehicles. Drop my name, John Wick, and I'll give you a good deal. Hey, thanks. Star Wars. After discovering that Anakin could be very powerful with the Force but had a lot of fear and attachment issues over his mother, the Council sends Obi-Wan back to Tatooine to buy his mother out of slavery and relocate her to Coruscant in a safe neighborhood. Anakin now knows that even without him in the picture, his mum will live a safe and happy life and can detach from her much more easily than leaving her alone on a savage world. And even if he isn't able to fully detach from her, he never has the impetus to slaughter the Sand People and kickstart his descent to the dark side. It's not a sure plan, but certainly one that would produce a version of Anakin who ends up resenting the Jedi just a little less. Maybe even enough to not slaughter younglings in the future. Please, Lightning McQueen, change your tires in this pit stop. Okay. Then his tires wouldn't have blown out in the last lap and he would have won, as he was comfortably leading the race. And no need for a tiebreaker race. The Emperor's New Groove. Yzma originally says that she could turn him into a flea, a tiny little flea, put that flea in a box, put that box into another box, and eventually send that box to myself so I could smash it with a hammer. Then she says to save on postage, she'll just use poison, which ends up not being poison. Even if she messed up the original plan, he'd be a flea, and for all intents and purposes, out of the picture pretty instantly. Yzma messed herself up trying to save a quarter? School of Rock. Mrs. Mullins says, "Can I see your ID, Mr. Sheebley?" Sorry, I don't have it, Mrs. Mullins. Oh, I'm sorry. You won't be able to teach the kids unless you have proof you're a teacher or who you're saying you are. And roll credits. To be fair, I've done a lot of substitute teaching and no one has ever asked to see any kind of identification. Not once ever. Don't swim to the drop-off, Nemo! Okay, Dad! And roll credits. That was the most predictable reaction for a kid his age, though. Marlin shouldn't have put him down in front of his new friends and been so rude about his fin. That should have been a private conversation. Literally not picking Anakin to be Padme's bodyguard when the tension between them is thicker than Jabba. I concede that this is a stupid plot point, as in the script, Anakin does indeed have a crush on Padme from a young age.
but I would argue that the chemistry between Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen was basically non-existent, so in the film we're given no reason to imagine it either. In the words of Yancey Croshaw, to say Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman had chemistry in that film is like saying that a chair stacked on top of another chair is a sizzlingly erotic love scene. There's actually a term for this trope. It's called the idiot plot. It's a term for a plot that hangs together only because the main characters behave like idiots. A single intelligent move or question by any of the characters and all problems would be resolved. It's not so bad if the characters are supposed to be acting like idiots, but it's very bad if the idiot plot depends on intelligent characters picking up the idiot ball for the plot to work. The main antagonist in that 2016 film featuring a bunch of DC villains is a member of the team herself, Enchantress, who turned out to be evil and gains power thanks to some magic MacGuffin that the lady running the team uses to control her. Literally, the entire plot of S Squad wouldn't have happened if they didn't bother assembling the frickin' squad. Or if Waller goes, "I have an idea. We start a team of supervillains and use them to do our dirty work." And the government guy who had authorized this goes, "No." The end. Rent. "Hey Mom, Mark here. I'm sorry, it didn't work out. I'm being evicted. Can I go home again?" Roll credits. Inside Out. In the scene where sadness and joy meet the two workers in the long term, they send the gum commercial memory through the wall, the little flap that opens if you push a memory through it, where it goes up to the headquarters. I don't know why they didn't think of sending the core memories through that instead. Frozen. The parents completely isolated Elsa from the world, leaving her with insecurity and anxiety. They also seemingly neglected Anna as her behavior was never in check, which is why she continuously butted her way into Elsa's space when she clearly needed some time alone to clear her head. Maybe if the two had actually talked instead of Anna's near assault on Elsa, something could have been worked out that didn't include running away and getting hypothermia in a semi-frozen river. Sleeping Beauty. "Honey, we should invite Maleficent to our daughter's christening. I know she's the mistress of all evil, but it'd probably end up worse for us if we didn't invite her." I was also going to say Sleeping Beauty, but for a different reason. Those damned fairies. They knew that they had to keep her safe until sundown on her 16th birthday. They managed to protect her up until the very last day, and then they send her out in the wilderness to pick berries. Alone. Ladies, you just had to run out the clock. How good are those berries that they couldn't wait until the next day? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I can't see the Indominus Rex. Let me just take a look at the GPS tracking device. Oh, it's in the cage, but invisible. Better not open any doors or go inside. She's the man. I'm sorry, but you're very clearly a girl dressed as a boy. Do you even go here? Credits. Also, I was factoring in the way that she talked to sound like her brother. And if your brother's in London and you're in his school pretending to be him, where does everyone else think you are? Wait a minute, Doc. What are you talking about? What happens to us in the future? Are we going to become buttholes or something? No. You and Jennifer both turn out fine. It's your kids, Marty. Something's got to be done about your kids. Well, Doc, if this happens in the future, why don't you come inside and we talk about it over a couple of beers? We'll make a note to make sure the kids don't misbehave 30 years from now. Let's hurry, though. We've got an important day ahead of us. It could be argued that showing them was the teaching. You can't just tell a teenager something and have them remember it 30 years down the line easy peasy. Marty had to be taught not to let needles wind him up. Jeepers Creepers. Just mind your own business and keep driving. Didn't Jeepers scare them before they saw the church? So he'd already know Justin Long's fear smell, so he'd be hunting him anyway. All the same though, if you see a creepy guy in a trench coat dump an obvious dead body down a hole, don't frickin' stop. Jumanji: The Next Level. Spencer, you idiot. He was depressed and wanted to escape his life. People do stupid, crazy things when they're depressed. He never expected his friends to come in after him. Meet the Parents. Ben Stiller could be like, "Could everyone settle down and give me a chance to explain?" Avengers: Infinity War. As soon as Ma and Cull landed in New York, Doctor Strange could have used the Time Stone repeatedly to his advantage. Well, that's the whole problem with Marvel now. At any point he could have just, frozen time? Or stuck those idiots in a time loop? Or just reversed time so they were ready for them. You can't have all-powerful time travel introduced because it makes every other problem you don't solve with it seem pointless and stupid. Home Alone 1. Yeah, sure, just forget about one of your kids.
Home Alone 2. Oh, congratulations on learning from your mistakes and managing to get your kid to the airport this time, and he's gone. Do you think Child Protection Services were like, yeah, most people don't lose their kid once a year. We're gonna have to come over and see what's up. Gone with the Wind. If Ashley had just told Scarlett in plain English that he loved Melanie, then Scarlett would have given up chasing him. Instead, he'd say things like, "She's like me, we're blood," because they were cousins. "We understand each other." Basically, Scarlett misinterpreted that to mean he didn't love her, but was marrying her for other reasons. It wasn't until the end that after Melanie died that Scarlett realized Ashley loved Mellie and not her. She wasted years of her life on something that could have been cleaned up with a simple phrase. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Just portkey Harry to the graveyard right off the bat, you idiots.
Well, actually, if Voldemort had conjured a firearm to kill Harry Potter, not even a mother's love would have saved him from that. But no, he had to be all melodramatic and Avada Kedavra to the little chosen one. Avada Kalashnikov! You don't even need that. He's a baby. You could do it with a bucket of water or like a boot.
Good God, these comments got dark. But yes, the narrator has seen many jokes, including the infamous Potter Puppet Pals sketch, showing just how quickly either side could have resolved the problem by just whipping out Uzis and riddling their antagonist with bullets. It's less of a good story, though. The Martian. All 6 astronauts are fools, as are all of the planners at NASA. If it were even remotely possible that the lander could be toppled in a Martian windstorm, the first order of business upon landing would have been to tie it down and secure it against such a threat. Andy Weir said he fudged the science on that. There's not enough wind on Mars, and he knew it. But he couldn't think of another way to strand his character, so he went with it. Twilight. Stop staring at me, you vitamin D deficient creep. Story over. Hey, what's creepy about a really old man sneaking into a teenager's bedroom to watch her sleep? The creepiest thing I ever saw. I was working with some emotionally disturbed kids. They'd earned a treat and got to watch a movie. They were watching The Wizard of Oz, and one of the kids says, "This is stupid. The metal guy should just use his axe to take the lady, Dorothy's, heart." I had to admit that would have solved the Tin Man's dilemma. Oh God. The Labyrinth. At the start, our protagonist meets a bug and asks her where to go, not how to get to the castle. The bug said to the right, and when she left, the bug said,
"Oh, if you go to the left, you'll end up in that troll castle."
Remember when Star-Lord got mad and started smacking Thanos in the face? Yeah, we could have skipped Endgame, to be honest.
Nope. Doctor Strange saw 14 million realities, only one had the best outcome.
This implies he saw futures where Star-Lord doesn't smack Thanos around, and for whatever reason, those futures are worse than what we got in Endgame. That scene is actually pretty brilliant, because it puts to rest any complaints about what the Avengers should have done. It doesn't matter what anyone else should have done, the only reality that mattered was the one that played out in Infinity War and Endgame. Maybe the reason why they fail in every 14 million realities is because Star-Lord is an idiot in every reality and always smacks Thanos. The Matrix. If Neo had just taken the blue pill and lived out his miserable days like the rest of us.
And everyone's life would have been arguably better.
Wow, thanks for throwing away the entirety of everyone's life and condemning us all to miserable existence in a polluted, dark, destroyed, and miserable real world. From how I see it, the bald dude from the first movie was the real hero. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The kid finds the golden ticket and sells it to another rich, spoiled kid. Easy millions, and they're not poor anymore, and he wouldn't have a trauma because of the dying kids in the factory. Gremlins. If the idiot had only followed the rules.
The rules aren't clear. It's always after midnight.
The Lion King. Don't listen to Scar, Simba. He wants to be king through any means necessary. And nobody goes to that gorge to practice their roars. I don't think Mufasa knew that Scar was quite that untrustworthy and power-hungry. He knew he was a bit of a jerk, but he didn't think he'd murder or try to seize power. Mufasa saw good in Scar. Otherwise, instead of saying, "Help me, brother," he would have said, "You did this, didn't you, you fratricidal prick? I knew you'd pull something like this." Thor 1. Hey Thor, don't go fight the ice people. You also made Loki into a bad guy, you idiot. Kurtwood Smith should have played Odin. The Blair Witch Project. Just walk downstream. Star Wars: The Last Jedi. If Hux had just ordered the Dreadnought to fire on any capital ships in range, the whole movie would have been over, the bad guys would have won. John Wick. There's no need to hurt the dog. You wanted a classic car? Your dad's a wealthy Russian mafia boss? Use your daddy's money to buy a similar car at auction. Everybody lives happily ever after. Also, John Wick is such a legend, especially with that crime organization, and not a single member of the Sun's crew recognized him. What? Hey, that's John Wick. We should probably leave him alone. Batman, if Bruce's parents took the car. And Superman, if everyone had just listened. And of course Batman vs. Superman, if the two of them had just stopped brooding at each other and kissed. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. If they'd just paid attention in class all year and written their damn essays, we wouldn't have had to go on one of the greatest movies of all time. Harry Potter. Talk to an adult. In the books he does, and the adults are almost not useless sometimes. In the films, yeah, he just kinda Leroy Jenkinses his way into several situations. Dumb and Dumber. The Ring. Just don't watch the movie. Problem solved. I can forgive being tricked by that because there's no reason for them to know, but I got genuinely angry in the theater when that idiot kid watched the movie toward the end. Just destroy the frickin' tape. Brant goes, "Here's your rug back, Lebowski." Lebowski goes, "I'm the dude, man." Bowling, Green Herb, Bob Dylan, roll credits. Uncut gems. Just all of it. That mix of relentless optimism and bad decision-making is so good for building tension. It's like seeing one of those hold my beer dudes that has a slim chance of actually making it. Batman the Dark Knight. If the bank manager with the shotty had some training and been a better shot, he could have just iced the Joker and boom, roll credits. Harry Potter. If Voldemort had just yeeted Harry into a wall after doing away with his parents. Oh my god, that's a spectacularly dark image and a very Gen Z casual term. I'm disturbed and in awe. On the other hand, the following commenter provides a pretty good counterpoint. What you're forgetting is that Voldemort is a complete frickin' drama queen. He could have gotten away with creating a single Horcrux, maybe another as a backup, but he did it 7 times. Why? Drama! He needed Blood of the Foe to be rezzed. But guess what? When you're literally the wizard reincarnation of the leader of the Third Reich, literally everyone not allied with you is your foe. Why did he orchestrate a whole thing to get Harry's blood? Again, drama! Heck, he could have made his Horcruxes out of like some random rocks or something and then chucked them into the middle of the ocean so they could never be found. Instead, he used as many flashy named relics as he could find. Why? Drama! And yes, he could have just connected Infant with Brick and been done with it, on frickin' Halloween night, by the way, because of course it was, but that just wouldn't have been dramatic enough for him. See, without his drama, he's just a charismatic mass murderer named Tom. But with drama, he is Dark Lord Voldemort. And who can blame him? Also, his whole shtick was magical supremacy. Using Muggle methods for important tasks is bad optics. The Lorax. My brother could have lived in blissful ignorance, but sometimes a kid's got to listen to his crotch instead of his brain. Elrond should have just stabbed Isildur the second he said no and kicked his corpse into the abyss. The big victims of the news who played us all, but turned out to be the real villains. Recently there was this guy in a town in Ontario who filed charges on his neighbor for spraying him with a water pistol. Her story comes out first to the media, saying how she can't return to work as school support staff until the charges are sorted out, and gives a big sob story about how she was just having a fun water fight with a neighbor and accidentally sprayed this guy while he was mowing his lawn. And weeks later, his story gets published in the paper. He's repeatedly received targeted attacks from this neighbor and others. He says likely because he's the one black guy on the street of a small town, in an interracial marriage, and he releases his security camera footage of him just casually cutting his lawn, with the other neighbor actively telling the kids to bring her water pistol while she's standing behind him, and then spraying him directly with it. And the camera also captures the audio of the aftermath, where some racial slurs are dropped, also a recurring thing. What's also funny is that the neighbor claimed that there was some sort of language barrier misunderstanding between them. The guy is straight up Canadian and speaks clearer than most people. In 1961, Captain Julian Harvey was found drifting at sea in a lifeboat with the lifeless body of one René Duperrault. When he was rescued, he explained that he had been hired by the girl's family to sail them around the Florida Keys for a vacation in a ketch called the Bluebell. He went on to explain that the previous evening, a strong wind had caused the main mast to snap and pierce the hull, causing the ship to sink. Worse still, a fire broke out, separating him from the family and the only other crew member, his own wife. He got into the lifeboat hoping to swing behind and hopefully get through the cabin from behind, but the ship had already sunk rapidly, and the other person he was able to recover was the already dead Renee. Truly a tragic story. That was until 3.5 days later, Terry Jo Duperrault, the other daughter of the Duperrault family, was found drifting at sea in a small cork dinghy. She was dehydrated, starving, sunburnt like heck, but alive. When she was healthy enough to make a statement, the story she told was very different from Harvey's. She woke up to find her brother and her mother already dead, and when Captain Harvey saw her, he shouted at her to go back to her cabin. She did so, cowering under the covers, and says that Harvey was standing at the door of her cabin. She thinks that maybe he was holding his brother's rifle, but she's not completely sure. He eventually left, and when the water started to fill her room, she went up on deck. Harvey got her to help undo the life raft. However, when the rope slipped through her fingers, he dove into the water after the raft, leaving her on the sinking vessel. She then remembered the cork dinghy and crawled into it. As you can see, her account is very different from Harvey's, and most notably, there was never a fire. Sadly, we'll never likely know the full story, as Harvey would take action to no longer be alive hours after Terry Jo was found. Well, yeah, if that's what he did the moment a potential witness materialized and hadn't even given her statement, that points to one story being more likely than the other, doesn't it? God, horrible. Ian and Angela Diaz. The story appeared on 60 Minutes. In short, Ian, who was a deputy US Marshal, claimed that his ex, Michelle, was posting certain misleading bedroom fantasy adverts on Craigslist in an attempt to get Angela to become a victim of the unspeakable act. Eventually, Michelle ended up arrested and sat in jail for 88 days as police investigated the matter. It was during that investigation that they realized things didn't add up. It was all a ploy to frame Michelle as part of a twisted plot to get her to walk away from a condo she'd purchased with Ian. At first, it was assumed or implied that Angela alone was responsible, and she pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, 5 years later, Ian was found guilty for his participation in the plot and sentenced to 10 years in prison himself. This is actually a super sad case because poor Michelle was absolutely tormented in prison. The media coverage of her was horrendous. She couldn't get a job afterwards. Her credit was also ruined. Her parents' business took a dive as well. I know Ian and Angela went to prison, but Michelle's life was seriously ruined, in a way that you can't really make up for, like public perception and stuff. Ugh. Anna Julia Quezada. She was dating a divorced man who had a son. One day the son goes missing and the news starts interviewing the parents. She'd always stand next to the dad, crying and begging the kidnapper that if they're watching to please give the kid back. I remember this very vividly watching the news. Turns out there was no kidnapping. She got rid of the kid the very first day of his disappearance, and played her part around her boyfriend and the news. People believe she did it out of jealousy and in hopes of convincing her boyfriend to move to her country to get over his kid. Her young daughter also passed away in 1996 in some strange circumstances. In 1864, a train pulled into London carrying a bloodied, unconscious man. Police were alerted, and when the man came to, Mueller told them that as they were riding, 2 men had approached him and tried to rob him. However, Mr. Mueller fought back. He was shot and then left behind as the robbers jumped off the train. What actually happened was Franz Mueller had attacked a Mr. Thomas Briggs, a 69-year-old banker, and robbed him of his gold chain and pocket watch. Later in the day, Mr. Briggs would be found unconscious, lying on the tracks because Mr. Mueller shot him and threw Briggs off the train. Briggs would soon pass away from his injuries. The police were very suspicious, and then a pawn shop owner came forward identifying Mueller as selling him Briggs' gold chain. The London police issued a warrant, however Mueller had already fled the hospital and boarded a sail ship for New York. Scotland Yard inspectors took a steamship to New York, beating Mueller by weeks. They and an entire crowd of people were waiting at the docks when Mueller arrived. And that's the story of the first murder on a train. There's a cool story about it. Mr. Briggs' hat. Corey Harris. He's the guy who went viral earlier this year for showing up at a Zoom court hearing, driving while on a suspended license. He spent 2 days in jail. Then it was reported that Harris should have had his license reinstated 2 years prior. Harris's attorney set up interviews with local TV stations stating his innocence. Good Morning America does a piece on Harris and lectures the viewers to not judge a book by its cover. Harris went back to court. The judge does his homework and discovers Harris has never had a license in Michigan or any other state, yet has been to Secretary of State's office multiple times to renew his ID. The opportunity was there for him to get a license, he just chose not to. He goes viral again, but this time because he lied and embarrassed so many people along the way. Karen Matthews. She faked her daughter's kidnapping not long after Madeleine McCann went missing so that she could get money. She hid her inside a bed at a friend's house and planned to collect the reward money. People actually felt sorry for her, thinking her daughter was missing and that it was a huge police investigation. Ended up in jail for kidnapping, perverting the course of justice, and false imprisonment. Katie Sorensen, the nutjob momfluencer, who claimed a couple was following her through a shopping center, plotting to kidnap her children, supposedly because they were such good-looking kids. Turns out the other couple were just shopping at the same time and did absolutely nothing wrong at all, and that she just wanted the attention and more followers. I just listened to a podcast about a girl, Mackenzie Sharilla. Basically, she, her boyfriend, and another friend were involved in a crash that killed the boyfriend and the friend. She was a driver, and she survived. At first, it seemed like there was some kind of fault in the car, or that she simply lost control of the vehicle, but as the investigation went on, they realized she'd planned the crash and ran into that wall on purpose. It was a crazy listen. Belle Gibson claimed she had cancer, claimed she beat it through her diet, claimed to donate $1 million to a cancer hospital, didn't have cancer, and didn't donate. She lied about everything, played the victim too. Who knows how many people died following her advice? The scary part is that if she didn't claim to donate to cancer, nobody would have looked into it and she probably would still be going strong. There were so many frustrated people insisting that her story didn't make sense. For one thing, brain cancer doesn't metastasize. And the other obvious one is that cancer doesn't miraculously go away when you drink freshly squeezed fruit juice. But they couldn't expose her because nobody could prove it when her medical records were private. So due to all the medical privacy laws, the investigators kept hitting dead ends when they tried to expose her health fraud, until somebody gave them the magic advice. If she can lie about this, she can lie about anything. Look for other lies. So they gave up on investigating the medical lies and turned to her financial records, which are much easier to examine. Once they destroyed her credibility regarding the charity, it was easier to break down the cancer lies. Aha, the real-life figure behind the apple cider vinegar series. Spoiler alert, I guess. God, that actress really maxed out on roles that would make people hate her in 2025, between this and Abby in The Last of Us. I used to install security cameras as a side job. I was asked to help out a lady going through a horrible divorce. Her soon-to-be ex-husband was sending her threatening text messages from burner phones. He was coming by at all hours of the night and breaking windows, and a few times he attempted to set their house on fire. A friend of hers reached out to me and explained the situation and asked if I could help her in any way. I purchased cameras and an NVR and went over one night in February and installed the whole system, wires and all. I never felt scared during any of my installations, some of which were in really bad neighborhoods. But for this psycho had me really worried, so I did the job armed. After finishing up, I showed her how the system worked and told her to call me if she ever needed anything else. A couple of weeks later, I get a call from a fire investigator asking me for help in recovering video. He told me that the guy had returned, broke out a first-floor window, and threw in a Molotov cocktail, causing the first floor of the house to be engulfed in flames. The woman and her 2 daughters were trapped upstairs. The police showed before the fire department, and they had to grab an extension ladder from the neighbor's house and rescue the family through a second-floor window. One of the girls was taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. I walked the guy through the process of pulling up the video. Once he got to the right time on the camera facing the bathroom window, he said, the video just goes blank. I told him that I set up the video cameras to be super sensitive to movement, so the only way it can go blank is if the camera is removed or damaged in some way. I directed him to a camera that would cover the area under the camera that goes blank, and he should see somebody mess with it. He tells me that nobody ever approached it. I then informed him that the only way that this scenario is possible is if the guy got into the house and disconnected the feed from the inside. We concluded our conversation since it'd now need to pore through a lot of video in order to find the man going into her house. About a month passes by and I'm driving to work. I hear the woman's name who I'd been helping mentioned on the radio during a news segment. I started paying attention and soon found myself feeling weightless in my chair. It hadn't been her husband at all. She had been the one doing all of these things in order to get her husband arrested and sent to jail. She had burner phones bought to send herself text messages. She'd been going out at night and breaking the windows. She had been taking the family out to dinner, excusing herself to go to the restroom, and then driving home to break a window and trying to set the house on fire before returning to the restaurant. She had been the one to disconnect the camera from inside the house the night that she almost killed her whole family in an attempt to frame her husband. I thought I was protecting her from a psycho, but it turns out I was helping the psycho. In short, I thought I was helping a victim by protecting her from her soon-to-be ex-husband, but she was trying to frame him by risking her kids' lives. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Dave Krupa had been casually dating after his 12-year relationship ended and ended up meeting a woman named Carrie Farther. They hit it off instantly and spent a lot of time together over the next few weeks. This was until Carrie texted Dave at work and asked if they could move in together. This was a shock to Dave and he said no. Carrie then sent a super nasty response and basically told him to F off. Dave then started getting bombarded with texts and emails from Carrie. The barrage of messages, already relentless and almost daily, started to expand to include other people in Dave's life, like his recent sort of ex-girlfriend Liz Golyar. Liz became a constant target of Carrie's stalking. Things escalated. At one point, Liz's house burned down. I suggest looking up this case for the full details because there's just so much going on in this story. As it turns out, Liz had killed Carrie, ostensibly out of jealousy of Carrie's quickly growing relationship with Dave. Liz then began impersonating Carrie and sending messages pretending to be her. That's right, Liz was the one behind all of those messages. The whole story is absolutely wild. I suggest checking out the book A Tangled Web by Leslie Rule for the full story. It's absolutely nuts. Mike Philpott. He wanted to show that his ex was violent and dangerous to their children, and he wanted to play the hero. He devised a plan to set alight his family home, and he'd rescue the family. Unfortunately, the fire took hold faster than he anticipated, and the rest of his family perished in the fire. He then played the victim on TV shows and news until they discovered that he in fact set the fire. Brittany Norwood. A former soccer star that worked at the Lululemon athletic clothing store in an upscale, wealthy neighborhood. She had worked the night shift with her manager and both with the victim of a brutal robbery and murder. A co-worker arrived at the Lululemon store the next morning, discovered the scene and contacted the police. The manager, Jana Murray, was brutally murdered and knifed over 60 times. Norwood suffered minimal injuries. Her pants ripped and she was tied up. Norwood claimed an African-American man first killed Murray, then approached Norwood, ripped her pants apart and committed the unspeakable act. The police initially believed her story and sent her home. During the investigation, the police came across text messages of the manager, Jana Murray, discovering Norwood had been stealing merchandise and said she was going to confront her about the theft and then fire her. The police soon made Norwood a suspect, especially after discovering Murray's car, with Norwood's blood inside, parked 3 blocks away from the store. Norwood claimed that the robber had told her to move the car, then walk back to the store or that they'd kill her. The police believed that this was absurd that she'd be allowed to leave and then return after being allowed to leave. She was arrested, charged with murder, convicted, and sentenced to life without parole. It was later revealed at her trial the entire murder was overheard by several people who didn't intervene. An Apple Store employee overheard women fighting and assumed it was just drama. Oh boy, how jaded would you have to be to mistake the sounds of a presumably traumatic murder for a tiff between co-workers? Sounds more like people were being cowardly to me. Tracy Andrews immediately comes to mind. She swore up and down her boyfriend was killed in a road rage incident. This was the 90s in the UK. The police put together a press conference to appeal for information, but it was designed to catch Tracy out. She told the story wrong because she couldn't remember her lies. Tracy had stabbed him 42 times. Joe Glinovics, the Illinois cop that staged his self-deletion to look like he was murdered by assailants. Police and community rallied behind his widow for weeks, searched for the assailants, funds were collected and donated, and tributes were made. Turns out he did actually finally off himself because he'd been embezzling money from a police program and he was about to be found out. Years ago, there was a local news story about a woman who was caught shoplifting baby supplies and formula. The cop that responded took pity on her because she had a young kid and no money. So instead of arresting her, he bought the stuff for her. A local business even went as far as to offer her a job, and I happened to know the owner. A few days after the story, I asked him if she got the job, and he said no, because every single one of her references said she was a massive kleptomaniac. Alright, it's small potatoes compared to some of these, but our city recently held its annual marathon. One man posted on the city subreddit that at one of the water stations his water had been spiked, and he asked for advice with the next steps. Of course, the next day the news story comes out. A man running in the marathon had acted erratically and attacked people, and claims he was under the influence of something put in his water. Maybe a month later, we sort of eventually find out the guy had a casual crystal habit and figured it would help him run faster. He took too much, had a violent paranoid episode, and attacked random people. I don't remember her name, I think it was Sherry Papini, but there was a YouTube video I watched of a girl who faked her own kidnapping and was trying to play the victim. While all of the resources were going to finding Sherry, there was a woman who was actually kidnapped. Sherry ended up serving jail time. Alicia Esteve Head is a Spanish businesswoman who claimed to be a survivor of the attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, under the name Tania Head. She joined the World Trade Center Survivors Network support group, later becoming its president. Her name was regularly mentioned in media reports of the attacks. In 2007, it was revealed Head's story was a hoax. She wasn't in New York City on September 11, 2001, but in reality was attending classes in her native city of Barcelona. Stephen Grant. He was my neighbor. His wife disappeared, and he was all over the news asking to help her and fake crying as much as possible. Turns out he had her torso in his garage, and the rest of her body parts were scattered in the metro park behind our neighborhood, including her head. Anna Ayala. She claimed she found a fingertip in a bowl of Wendy's chili. The press coverage cost the company over $20 million in losses. Turns out the finger came from a co-worker of her husband who had lost it in a work accident, and she intentionally planted it. 9 years in state prison. Natalia Grace's adoptive parents, who claimed that she was an adult when they adopted her. She was actually a child, not the diabolical mastermind akin to the movie Orphan. Bethany Storrow was the victim of an acid attack that was racially motivated in Vancouver, Washington. Turns out she maimed herself trying to self-delete with acid. She chickened out of drinking it after pouring it on her face. I remember watching an unhinged interview after she was found out. Her reasoning was that all of the attention would allow her to tell people about Jesus. LaDonna Humphrey, a true crime podcaster, foster mother of 5, multiple charities in her name, with a focus on cold cases where only the victim's body was found, and a director of a sober living facility. I highly recommend Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, as this is the tip of the iceberg. It turns out she was hounding her co-hosts on a podcast through catfish accounts for content. It was only when she took a screenshot and she was still logged in as one of these accounts, sending it to her co-hosts, that things started to unravel. She somehow gained police access to case files of Melissa Witt, masquerading as a PI, and uploaded her body being found to YouTube. She accused a completely innocent bystander of her murder on her podcast. The charities? Yeah, she was using them as her personal piggy bank. Her sober living facility was run as a cult with blatant financial fraud, overcrowding, slave labor, stealing funds meant for the business. Oh, and those fosters? One's a convicted unspeakable act offender who's also the handyman for the woman's sober living facility. Ugh. My God. Well, she seems to have taken the wrong lessons from her true crime podcaster lifestyle. Namely, the only thing that she tried to apply to her life was how to get away with murder. Luckily, not the literal kind. What a monster. Loshtgate. Ryan Losht and 3 other Olympic athletes lied about being robbed while at weapon point while out in Rio. Turns out they were drunk, went to a gas station, and Ryan vandalized part of it after peeing in public. The idiot got suspended, and he lost 4 sponsorships among other things when the lie was uncovered. Helena Taylor when she was replaced on Bayonetta 3. She was the original voice actress for Bayonetta in the first 2 games. About 2 years ago, she came out with an angry statement that she had been offered what sounded like a rather low amount of money for the 3rd game, and then replaced by Jennifer Hale. The entire vibe was that it was an intentional lowball to get rid of her. She insisted that fans should boycott the game. And you saw the response immediately on Reddit. People wanted to jump to her defense and criticized Platinum Games. Slowly, the rest of the story began to come out. She apparently demanded a ridiculous fee plus royalties. She'd lied or at the very least deliberately misrepresented the deal previously. She increasingly came off as a little unhinged and vindictive, with an inflated sense that she was responsible for the success of the games and irreplaceable. For several days, it seemed like a new detail was coming out every day that kept making her look worse and worse. It was particularly interesting to see this happen in such a short period of time. To watch the public opinion shift as more information was revealed with each subsequent day. It really showed the importance of getting all of the facts, hearing from multiple sides, and not immediately falling for rage bait internet drama in fan culture. There's an African proverb that says, "The child who's not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth." What time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire yourself and burning it all down? I have 2 sisters, one older and one younger. My mum worked hard to make sure each of us felt special and loved. My dad, not so much. He called my older sister Princess, and my little sister was referred to as Little Buddy. For whatever reason, I got kind of forgotten about. I didn't mind most of the time. I found my dad annoying, demanding, and at times unreasonable. I hated the way he pushed my mum around and would lash out about things that didn't make sense. Basically, I thought of my dad as a total brat. He'd have a bad day at work and would find someone to take it out on. Usually, my mum and I. But still, I tried. I'd try to cuddle up with him, feeling hurt when he'd shrug me off and tell me that I needed to shower. I made gifts for him. I got good grades. I won poetry contests. I won awards through the Bible quiz. Never argued, but it never seemed to work. Before long, he'd find something to yell at me about. Things that usually didn't make sense. If my little sister and I fought, the whole thing was always my fault. My feet naturally turn inwards. I hated it when my dad would come to my sporting events because seeing me run with inturned feet seemed to be humiliating for him. One time I was running from one base to another, feeling exhilaration because I'd done it. I'd hit a home run. But the smile died on my face when I heard my dad yell, "Run with your feet straight! You look stupid!" As a teen, my mum really stepped up and started insisting that he was going to leave me alone. He was never physically bullying, but the way he talked to you made you feel like he was trying to say something that would break you. When I was 15, he was almost successful. I went through a couple of really bad months. A friend died, my dog died, we moved, and my mental health was tanking. A week after my friend died, it was a car accident, my dad asked, "So, when are you going to get over it?" It took me by surprise because at that time I wasn't crying or acting out. I was just sitting there, eating dinner with the family. My mum immediately reacted, gasping out a surprised, "John!" and the two of them began fighting again over my dad's need to mess with me. I sat there, head down on the table, thinking, I'm not allowed to be sad, I'm not allowed to feel happy, I can't get mad, I'm in pain and he just finds it annoying. Just leave me alone, Dad. Leave me alone. That's when it clicked. My dad, for whatever reason, just seemed to hate me. I could try to make him like me, but it wasn't going to work. As I got older, my goal just became to avoid him. His seemed to be to forge a relationship with me for the sole purpose of having a target for his need to bully. We were never going to have a healthy father-daughter relationship. And that's when it clicked. It's not me, it's him. My sisters could like and love him, but I didn't need to respect him. I was done trying to please him, trying to do the right things, trying to be the daughter that my dad seemed to want. Fast forward to almost 10 years later, after the birth of my son, my dad had tried to begin a new relationship with me because for whatever reason he latched onto my kid. For the sake of my kid, I let my dad have a relationship with him, but I'm always monitoring, waiting for my son to develop a personality that would change the way my dad saw him. There was no way I was going to let my dad do to my son what he did to me. Fortunately, my dad died before the change could happen. I sat in the back of his funeral, dry-eyed and satisfied. Of course, my sisters were upset. They had good relationships. But for me and my mum, it kind of felt like the Wicked Witch was at long last dead. No more stress, no more unreasonable expectations. The eggshells we'd been walking on were swept away and we could be content. I have an uncle in West Virginia that I started to see as my father figure. At first, I jokingly would call him Dad, testing the waters, waiting for him to remind me that he actually already has kids and doesn't need an adopted daughter. I go to see him once a year, but I always felt like maybe he sees my need to see him as a dad to be annoying. Then a couple of weeks ago I asked him if he was coming up for Christmas, and he said he couldn't. But then he said, I love you, my daughter. Thank you for providing a nice counterexample for your dad. I'm glad you realize at the very least it wasn't your fault. Whatever issues he had were his alone, and if it hadn't been you, he would have vented that on someone else. I'm glad that you found your uncle as an ersatz better father figure. And just to warn everyone, there are some stories of familial mistreatment that get quite sad and dark here, so brace yourselves. For some reason or another, my mother hated me. As a little girl, I could never understand why she treated me so much worse than my 3 other siblings, and I'd often go up to my grandmother and ask her, why doesn't my mama love me? She could never give me a straight answer and would tell me, "Your mama loves you in the only way she knows how." That answer confused me because my mum loved my siblings just fine. And as a disclaimer, her love was toxic as frick, and she did a different kind of damage to them. Now, when I say that my mother treated me badly, it started out with her picking fights with me. She'd constantly nitpick at everything I did, chastising me, and at the end of the day punishing me harshly for something that could have been a gentle scolding. When I got older, she started cussing at me and calling me names. She'd often ignore me for days on end, and when she'd talk to me, it would be to make me the butt end of a bad joke, or to tell me that she hated me. Yes, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and told me she hated me. Disclaimer number 2, she was an addict and an alcoholic, and she loved to claim all of the emotional stuff she put me through as a child were the effects of the things she was taking, and that it wasn't even that bad. So yeah, this relationship really began to tear at me after a while. All sorts of terrible things she did to me growing up, the terrible things she said and how she ignored me constantly, all of it was very different than how she treated my other 3 siblings. She was very close with one of my brothers and my sister. She'd spend time with them constantly, take them anywhere, buy them anything that they wanted, and it made me resent them. My sister would sometimes rub it in my face that Mum loved her more. It was my sister's way of having power over me, and it was one of those things that made my rage bubble over onto innocent people. I just wanted to be loved and accepted. I wanted to be cared for and cherished as a child should be. And when I didn't get that, I plotted on how I was going to get her love and affection. In my screwed-up mind, I thought that if I got rid of my older brother and younger sister, I would be one of the only people left for her to love. So I planned on that. How screwed up is that, huh? It wasn't just some thought that passed through my head, it was a constant idea. A plan that I was putting into place to get rid of my brother so that I could make room in my mother's heart for me. I feel ashamed writing it out. It was a dark time in my life, and I was also incredibly mentally ill. So one day, while my mother was out dealing with my brother and my sister was sleeping, I took the rest of her pills. My sister was super afraid of becoming addicted to meds after watching what my mother was going through, so there were a ton left, and I waited for my brother to come back. When I heard him come back in, his room was next to mine, I went into the kitchen and I made him a glass of juice. Earlier in the day, I'd crushed up the pills into a powder, and I mixed them into the juice. I went up to his room, knocked on the door, and offered him the cocktail of various prescription meds. He took the juice, and right before he was about to drink it, I'd thought, wait, how could I do this to my own brother? And I snatched the drink back, and it spilled all over the carpet. He was really mad, but at least he was alive. I never tried doing anything like that again. It felt so sick, wrong, evil. I mean, what kind of person thinks about doing that? Besides, my brother dying wouldn't make my mother love me anymore. She'd have just resented me for living instead of him. So, that's the sad, sick story of the worst thing I almost did. Probably still the worst thing I'll ever do. I didn't actually carry through with it, obviously, and I guess everyone lived happily ever after. My brother got clean and now has a happy family. I'm in college. My sister's leg healed up nicely, and my mum left us all after a while. But that's a story for another time. I finally decided to fight back against my bad parents. I only had to do it once to stop the physical stuff as well. The psychological stuff kept up, though. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting, and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated at a point when I was older, disowned, and was about to get kicked out. But my vindictive, defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mum isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child mistreatment, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. A lot of people are assuming my mother's illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States, but she married my dad, who's American, and they got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. When I was a teacher living in rural Alabama, I did not get along with my stepmother. She went out of her way to be as mean as she could to me. Once, when she left the house, she took the mouse for the family computer with her, so I couldn't use it while she was gone. Well, I did her one better by taking the cord from the back and then locking myself in my bedroom until she got home. She uses my little baby stepsister against me and tells her to tell me that she has a present for me. As soon as I unlocked the door, my stepmother yanks it out of my hand and starts screaming at me about why the computer won't work. Well, let me tell you, on one side of me I had a steel pole lying against the wall, and on the other a simple glass of water. I briefly entertained the notion of hitting her in the face with the pole, and instead I just chucked the harmless water in her face. Whew, I'm quite sure I avoided jail that night. Well done on not letting your intrusive thoughts win, or at least not the worst ones. I'd say you're the better, stronger person for it. Also, that behavior of just taking the mouse, because God forbid you be allowed to do anything remotely entertaining. People who just want others to suffer for no reason, what's going on in their heads? I had a co-worker at a non-commission-based retail job where they would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP. It's kind of a figure for your average sales per hour. She'd overhear my pitch for cards, which was required, and then lie to the customer so that they'd apply. I'd have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my coworkers and customers, actually. Now, one time I got lucky, and an 18-year-old kid came in to buy the most expensive desktop that we have on display, $2.5 grand. My coworker saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount. But my radio was dead. The coworker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone-cold ignored me. I go for the manager, she prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to the customer while I'm gone. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale because she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer who was mortified, I was literally told by my boss to ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does this kind of stuff. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I failed an HR complaint regarding her, and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. And they all got reamed for it. One of them's still in a management position, and the rest were eventually demoted or laid off. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I used to work in fast food, but I was the only person in the store that didn't smoke. Everyone else got to take a break to smoke, but since I didn't smoke, I wasn't allowed to. Eventually, I spoke to the owner about it and was rebuffed, so I went over their heads to the company board. The owner got his butt chewed out for rebuffing me, and I wound up getting a huge bonus on my next paycheck. But when they discovered that I'd reported them, I got fired immediately. Turns out they'd been violating company policy for food prep and storage, so I fired another report to corporate. The store got shut down for months, and my former boss got fined 6 figures. My brother is 10 years younger than me, and he's a teenager. I regularly drive him out to see his girlfriend, and I drive him to his classes as well. Recently, he's becoming very disrespectful and downright rude. He's only nice to me if I've made food or if he needs a ride, and in a way that really tees me off even more. The amount of times I've seriously considered pulling over and making him walk the last 10 miles home? Whew. My dad didn't seem to take any interest in my life since I was about 4. Then, when my mum left him and I told him I was going to leave, he then proceeded to do everything to get me to live with him. Buying me stuff, telling my mum wasn't a fit parent, trying to get custody in court. I decided to live with him in the end because I was too scared to start a new school midway through the year. He then dates this woman who is pretty much the catalyst in destroying their marriage, and he gets mad at me when I don't treat her like a mother. My mum is now trying to get custody, and I'd burn his house to the ground if it meant she'd win. Just go and live with her. Refuse to go back. Your dad will have to go through the system to get you back. I mean, true, the cops might take you back to him once or maybe even twice. But ultimately, if you're stubborn enough, the cops will refuse to do your father's bidding and tell him to take it to court. Trust me on this. Just go to your mom now. Well, I would, but she doesn't have a house right now. She's living with her brother, and I also want to finish the school year. She should have full custody by June. Moved to a new town and started going to a new church when Dad got cancer. I went to church and told the pastor to try and get advice. The pastor announced this to the convocation and also told everyone that some lady's horse was sick. I watched the entire convocation console this lady about her sick horse. The convocation was in tears about the sick horse while my dad was dying. Nobody said a word to my family. I haven't been to church since. Ugh, that's awful. I'm from the UK, so many of us aren't brought up in any religion. But my friend started going to our local church, and she just received news that her boss's new baby, who was only a few days old, had unexpectedly passed away. Totally distraught, she went to the church and she had a word with the vicar, asking if the baby could be mentioned in the "Please Pray For" section of the service. She was appalled when the first question asked was the baby Christian? As if any other baby would not be worth mentioning in the service. And when a clearly upset parishioner needed the support of the church at that time, she never went back to church. Oh man, middle school for me. I got really badly bullied at school, both mentally and physically. I wasn't getting any support at home, or that's what it felt like. I wasn't in a good place. I had so many negative thoughts and plans of how to get my revenge. Thankfully, I never had access to any sort of weapon, or I would have become one of those great school tragedies of America. That's how bad and deep in depression I was in. I did end up in a psych ward, and man, those places are terrible. I didn't get any help, but I only learned to bottle up my crap more. I can absolutely attest to being around people who are love-starved and then subsequently self-sabotaging or otherwise destructive. In a softer sense, if I felt rejected, I felt peace in sort of burning bridges to find myself. My wife was senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking. On the morning that the convention started, she was setting up the first of the 3 rooms she was responsible for. Manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves and loading them with stuff, and then somebody came in, took her ID badge off her desk and brought it to the convention's Lost and Found. The convention Lost and Found lady told my wife that lost badges have a $5 fee to get them back. My wife looked at the badge, looked at the lady, and said, "You know what? Keep it. I'm going home. Have a nice convention." She was about 25 feet down the hall when the Lost and Found lady caught up to her and returned her badge. Wow, it's like they were trying to burn down their own village at that point. More like setting up a nuke in their own village. The lady was working for free, and you have the nerve to make her pay for something to do her job? Honestly, good power move from her. I don't know if it quite typifies fully burning the village down, but they definitely walked up to the town hall with a lit torch, raised their eyebrows suggestively, and gave everyone a sound idea of what would go wrong if they weren't properly respected. I love it. Whenever I'm in a meeting and my suggestions are getting constantly ignored and I'm getting interrupted and talked over, I get the weirdest urge to prove I still exist by jumping on the table and busting out the Queen of the Night aria. It's only really an issue because of a few specific coworkers who resort to just yelling if confronted politely. Their managers have now been made aware of this. When I'd been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids or groups of kids, and the school showed so little interest in helping me, I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of other kids, and not an eye was batted. When I finally took my mum's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the next line to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment, then when he kept going, I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to. I wanted them to see that this average-height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small, disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. The kid told him they were only pebbles, he wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again, I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child, they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying. And if it gets pointed out to them, they think that that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and having some pretty dark thoughts because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. And that's why I tried to take a bat to school, to bust some kneecaps. Thankfully, my mom caught me and realized how bad it was and got me out. But not before bringing down hell on those teachers. She even made the principal freak out. Despite how angry I was, for some reason I never even thought about using my dad's weapons, and I'll always be thankful for that. Deep down, I think it was because I really didn't want to hurt anyone, I just wanted them to leave me alone. Dumped at the doorstep of a youth shelter after my mum was hospitalized and my dad was in prison. I wasn't a super bright teenager, but I had enough sense to spend my last $20 on pepper spray and padlocks for my stuff. Predictably, people's stuff went missing all the time. I could write an essay on the issues in the public welfare system, ranging from the macro level, lack of funding, to the micro level, incompetent or burnt-out staff. There was violence, substance use, and creepy dodgy characters in crisis accommodation, but what bothers me 10 years later is the sheer stupidity of some of the adults who are meant to guide at-risk teenagers. I'd ask my social worker questions like, "Are there places which can help me with food this week?" Or, "How do I write a resume?" And that social worker would vaguely shrug and offer relaxation techniques and mindfulness strategies. Look, 3 people got arrested at this shelter last week. No amount of relaxation techniques are going to calm me down. I'm guilty of doing stupid and irresponsible things as a teenager, but eventually I finished high school and then 3 university degrees. I actually work for the same system that I was and am disappointed in, and there are so many practical resources available. They're underutilized because staff don't even know they're out there. If I just had a single adult to help me with the most simple tasks as a kid, it would have been so much easier. When you're a kid, you just don't know how university loan applications, taxes, budgeting and stuff work. Or at least I didn't. and everybody assumes that you do because they do. Like, I had no idea that in my country, the Department of Housing can pay for your rental bond. I stayed in a homeless shelter for an extra 1 to 2 months to save up $900 to pay for the bond of a crappy apartment. Extra months of broken sleep, men trying to pick the lock on my door, residents hyped up on ice. Last year, there was a 16-year-old girl on the train having a meltdown and making a big scene. She was clearly drunk, and people were just avoiding her. She started screaming that she missed her period and does anybody want to pay for her termination. She phrased it as a joke or a way to get money, which I didn't give, but she repeated the joke enough times that I wondered if it was true. We got to talking and I referred her to social services, downloaded a list of resources in her catchment area, and saved links and forms on her phone about how to arrange her own healthcare cards since she's over 15, so that she can visit a bulk billing GP on her own and get tested. In my country, the P-test from a pharmacy is about $15, but a pregnancy blood test ordered by your GP is free. We discussed different options that her GP might outline and other things that might be helpful. I know as well as anyone else that it's not always that straightforward, especially with 30 patients in your caseload and juggling them with a million other priorities. But in the biopsychosocial framework of health, where biological, psychological, and social factors are proposed to impact physical and mental health, we severely underestimate the impact of social circumstances. We let these kids down all the time, and it's preventable. Ugly baby syndrome: how parents really feel about their unattractive children. My daughter was born with this ridiculous nose, and I gasped in the delivery room. It was so bad. I noticed it immediately. It looked like a frickin' beak. This baby was only 5 pounds. That is so much nose for 5 pounds. My husband posted a picture on Facebook and I almost died. I begged him to take it down. Luckily, it turned out it was really swollen from pushing against my insides during my 26-hour labor, and it is so much better now. Well, I didn't notice so much when he was a child, but as he grew older, his nose got really big and I could see overall how ugly he was. I didn't feel bad or anything. He's great at sports and stands out on soccer. He has this group of friends, so he never really has had any social problems or inferiority feelings. He told us he had been bullied at school, but he seems to handle it really well. He ignores anyone who bullies him, or doesn't respond when someone calls him by a nickname. When someone tries to be aggressive, he just tells an authority figure about it. He's handled it really well and I'm proud of him. He'll probably do great. Athletic guys who are that confident have no trouble getting their fair share. A 6-year-old son has always been the spitting image of me, and I'm not a physically attractive man. He's already very bright though, so I'll know he'll find ways to work around that problem, like I did. I think my son is a good-looking boy now. He certainly gets a lot of compliments, but my god, he was an ugly baby. He sort of looked like a cross between a monkey and a frog. I'm not lying. He had a hairy forehead until he was about 6 months old, and then bam! Suddenly he became cute. The older he got, the better looking he's become. Even when he looked like a monkey frog, I loved the heck out of him and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. I think 95% of newborns are ugly. I naturally thought my daughter was the most beautiful creature on the planet. Thank God, we got a cute one. 6 months later, looking back on newborn pictures, I was horrified that I posted some of them on social media. I still cringe when I see them 3 years later. What an odd creature. Looked like a tiny, grumpy Churchill, which was in fact her nickname until she was about 9 months old. She's 3 now and insanely adorable. I know this because everyone who was honest about what an ugly baby she was agrees with me now. Wait, so people were straight up telling you she was a wrinkled meatbag from day one? We all think that about other people's newborns, but nobody's actually saying it. Come on, people! My now adult son isn't great looking, but he's fantastic fun and I'm so proud of him. His girlfriends freely admit that he laughs them into the bedroom. When my first daughter was born, she was the single most beautiful child that's ever blessed the planet. After my second son was born, my husband and I pulled out newborn photos of the first to look for similarities. There were none. With the benefit of hindsight, we were shocked at how weird my daughter had looked. I mean, now she's the most beautiful toddler that's ever blessed the planet, so I guess we're due for another rude awakening in about 2 years. From a slightly different perspective, I'm nowhere near as attractive as my older sister. We're so dissimilar looking and she's objectively prettier than I am. People used to ask me if I was adopted all the time. And by all the time, I mean literally every time someone found out we were sisters, I'd be asked that question. My mum always swore we were both beautiful, but when her nickname for my sister was the Beauty Queen, and mine was the Butterbean, I kind of figured it out on my own. Oh my god. My brother and I look nothing alike as well. People straight up don't believe we're related when they see us. I mean, I also don't look anything like either of my parents, so maybe I am adopted. My son was absolutely adorable until he hit puberty. Puberty made him gangly and scrawny, which, coupled with his wavy red hair and poor eyesight, made for a rather geeky-looking kid. Now he's almost 17 and he's grown into his body more. He's acquired a better sense of style and personality, and he's shaping into a handsome young man. He's come full circle. When my second daughter was born, my mum looked at her and said, "Now there's a face only a mother could love." I was heartbroken because I thought she was beautiful. My first son was born with hairy ears and a weird-looking bridge of his nose. One of my first thoughts about him was that nose had better straighten out. His ears stopped being fuzzy when he was a month old or so, but the bridge of his nose is just a little off still. Still, somehow he's 5 and gorgeous. My youngest son, God forgive me, was not overly cute. He was angry as all heck, jaundiced and had splotchy skin, and we barely saw his eyes for nearly a month. And he got uglier. Tiny eyes, far too close together, somehow even more angry, not jaundiced, but red and splotchy, with an incredible talent for arranging his features in the least flattering possible way. Suddenly, at 6 months, he metamorphosed into a gorgeous, big-eyed baby. Still grumpy looking, but at least cute. I'm kind of paranoid that they'll both turn unfortunate looking again. It was very challenging having loving feelings for a screaming ball of rage that was so disappointing looking for a while there. My friend has one beautiful child and one ugly child, and she told me at birth she thought her kid looked like Benjamin Button, and she kept waiting for him to grow out of it. He never did, she's always known. I know a very attractive couple who have 2 children, both in their late 20s now, who are some of the ugliest motherfrickers I've ever seen in my life. How the frick does that happen? Sometimes really attractive people are attractive because certain features are exaggerated or put together in a novel way. Stick 2 of those things together and you might get something amazing, but also you might get a weird collection of features that just don't sit right together. My granny would say the opposite. How can 2 ugly parents make such a gorgeous child? A woman I know had a baby about 10 months ago. The poor child looks like an egg. She has a big bald oval head and little features. I'm sure she'll grow into herself eventually. There was a girl I went to grade school with and she was not ugly, but not memorable either. She was teased a bit, being called a boy and stuff. Well, she got the last laugh because she grew up and became a stunningly attractive woman. Best part is, she's smart and has always had self-confidence. I saw her and really didn't recognize her at first, but we caught up and chatted when we ran into each other. I know this doesn't fit, but my daughter is beautiful. Has been since day one. She's 10, but tall and thin, and looks much older than her age. But my God, is she dumb. Some things are worse than being ugly. My child isn't ugly, but I'll always remember the relief of finding out he wasn't. To start with, he was 2 weeks overdue and my wife had to be induced. After 20 hours of labor, the consultant said his heart rate was fluctuating and we'd need an emergency C-section. After the procedure, a nurse called me in and told me not to look at the floor, just at my wife. I looked at my wife's face, surrounded by blue blankets, and then the floor. It looked like the finale of Jaws. When I finally saw my son for the first time, I cried like never before. Some of the nurses watched me as I picked him up and told him through the tears, "I'm so glad you're not ugly." One of the nurses gasped and said she'd never heard a new father say that to a newborn. Maybe not, but they've all thought it, I can tell you. My daughter was not a cute baby. She just wasn't. I love her so much, and I loved her despite her being less than attractive as an infant. I didn't feel disappointed or embarrassed or anything, it was just a fact. She's 7 now, and she's getting really pretty. She just had to grow into it. Her dad and I are both tall, and I think she'll be close to 6 foot based on her growth charts. She could model if puberty doesn't screw her over too bad. The worst is people showing you photos of their ugly offspring and you having to lie and say that the mutant in the photo is, oh, so cute. My trick is to say, he looks just like you, and watch their eye twitch as they realize what that means. Twins. The boy was frickin' adorable since day one, and the girl, not so much. She didn't really grow hair until age 3. Now at age 6, the tides are turning. The boy is taking after me. I was also a good-looking kid, but it didn't last, and also has a pretty annoying personality. The girl is looking pretty average now, but she has a great personality, and everyone loves her. When the nurses showed me my newborn child after a C-section, and still one on some pain meds, obviously, I said hesitantly, "Are you sure that's my baby?" He looked like a little rat with jet black hair and dark, almost black eyes. I just couldn't believe it. He's since grown into his looks, and his eye color and hair color have changed. He's very cute now. You know, it might have been naive to come here expecting people to just be volunteering the fact that they thought their kids were pug ugly. We're of course getting a lot of answers tempered by statements of, "Oh, but I love them anyway," or "but they grew into it." I'll be very interested to see if anyone outright says their kid is monstrous. I mean, I'll be heartbroken too, but it'll at least be a unique answer. Okay, my daughter wasn't a cute baby. I'm a mum here, but I'm also pretty objective about my kids. Realistic about what they are and what they aren't, though I'll love them no matter what. In fairness, I don't think most newborns are cute, especially white babies. They all seem red and squished for a long time. She was really cute from like 6 months to 5 to 6 years. After that, she went through a real homely streak. Chubby, kind of an androgynous face, and her cutting the F out of her beautiful hair didn't help things. Then she became really beautiful at like 14 to 15. That was her downfall. She started living in the beautiful bubble, where everyone gave her everything she wanted for free, including booze and substances, and it led to a very serious problem that nearly ruined her life. If she'd have stayed unattractive, she probably wouldn't have developed the serious problems that she did. She's 23 and still just wants to party. She hasn't held a job in several years. She's still beautiful, just a beautiful disappointment. It's weird because her little brother looks exactly like her, though his homely period was just a few bad haircuts when he was in a gawky stage. He looks like a model and acts like an angel. He's been a gift. I've been trying to save my daughter's life with her addiction for years. I've went without things for myself, and I've sacrificed for her problem even after she was well into adulthood. She doesn't appreciate it one bit. That I was paying for her to live right down to buying her tampons, and she'd always call me a fat, ugly B-word. Well, I wasn't always a fat, ugly B-word. After months of her nasty talk, after she'd literally punched me in the face while I was driving 70 miles per hour down a highway, calling me a fat B-word the whole time, heaven help me, but I told her, "So what? I'm a fat, ugly B-word now?" Well, I was a much cuter child than you were, so there. That shut her up for a minute. Though less than a few weeks later she was calling me a fat, ugly B-word again, so I guess it didn't do any good in the long term. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My one grandniece was born with a large, weird head. It isn't related to any problems, it's just big and lumpy. The first time my mother and I saw her, she was at a family gathering with my sister, the grandma, in attendance. Mum, sister, and I ended up together alone in a room, and we all looked at each other, guiltily waiting to see who'd say it. I think it was my sister. We all giggled and then told each other she'll probably grow out of it. She hasn't. She actually has a pretty face and is a smart, sweet, athletic girl, but the head. Of course, she has thin, light color hair, so you can see it easily too. I secretly thought my older daughter was an ugly baby for the first year and a half or so of her life. I was a bit disappointed and occasionally wondered if people who said she was cute were lying to me to make me feel better. She ended up growing into an adorable toddler. Then I thought she was a bit ugly again when she reached 4 to 5, and her hair was very long, nearly to her butt. It made her face look kind of fat, despite that she's always been very thin, and the long hair I guess was weighing too much and looking drab. She decided to cut her hair to chin length, and after that she was extremely pretty. It was really amazing what a difference a new haircut made. The difference in the before and after pictures of her haircut are pretty telling. I didn't think my son was cute when he was born. I had bad postpartum depression and I cried often because of it. I cried anytime someone told me he was cute because I just thought they were lying. He grew into a very cute toddler and is now an awkward-looking 7-year-old who's attractive when his hair is cut a very specific way and is otherwise awkward-looking. I've also got a 7-year-old in the same situation. His big ears, round head, and double cowlicks, think alfalfas, require a tight on the sides, very specific length on top kind of haircut. With that and his thick plastic glasses, he's handsome, albeit a bit gangly. My youngest, though, is amazingly adorable. Like a frickin' angel child. They look unrelated. Don't tell them. I really believe that most parents will never know if their child's ugly. I think every parent truly believes their kids are the most beautiful things in the world. As a mother of 4, I sometimes wonder if my children are ugly, and I just don't see it. Because I've known people with some pretty ugly kids that are always posting pics with comments like, "your daily dose of cuteness," or "isn't he lovely?" Now that my kids are older, and I know they're gorgeous, I found myself looking back at some not-so-attractive baby moments. But I never thought so until looking at them years later. Parents in denial. When will you realize your child is ugly? How will you feel about it?
Yeah, these answers have made me so scared to have kids.
My sister was an extremely ugly baby and my parents knew it. She didn't have a single piece of hair on her head until well past the age of 2, massive ears and a nose like a beak. My mother was so ashamed she never took her hat off. She's 18 now and she still has a pretty terrible nose, but she's learned to combat it with a contour palette. Full disclosure, I'm not a parent, but I was a hideously unattractive child. I was born without a chin. Apparently I sucked my thumb so much in the womb that I wore it away completely. My dad claims, and my usually less silly mother confirms, that when I first came out, his first words were, "Holy crap, is he always going to look like that? I have a chin now, but I still looked like Beaker until about the age of 4. Oh, I was there at the moment another mother figured it out, and it was so embarrassing. I was at my girlfriend's parents' house having dinner when her mum's wine circle came over for their nightly patio drinking on the back porch. At some point after dinner, my girlfriend and I went out to have a glass of wine with them and chill. Now, my girlfriend had a younger sister who was in high school, and all of the mothers there had daughters of a similar age. Anyways, one of the mothers very straight-facedly asked my girlfriend if she'd heard of a butterface and what it meant. My girlfriend starts laughing and cracking up and goes into a long winding joke about what a butterface is and what it means, laughing the whole time. At the end of her explanation, the whole group of mothers are sitting there quietly, absolutely mortified at what my girlfriend is gleefully rattling off. After a very confused minute, the mother who asked about it simply said she'd just found out that day that was her daughter's new nickname at school. Ouch. Oh no. Oh no. I mean, at least this still points to our conclusion that most parents are happily delusional about their kids' perceived cuteness, right? And the kid is in high school, going through puberty. Generally, things can only get better from that point. Also, fun fact, this list of submissions has the most deleted answers that I've ever seen. People felt bad about writing in and they took their answers down in breathtaking quantities later. Like I'm scanning through entire screens full of deleted answers to find the remaining ones. I was a cute child, but puberty was not kind to me. From 12 through 18, I was fat, not ugly, but definitely not good looking. My mum would often say to me, "My daughter's a good person, and even people uglier than you have boyfriends, so I don't think you should have a problem." Luckily, I've lost weight, got braces, my skin cleared, but I'm glad she always emphasized on inner beauty. I was an adorable baby and cute toddler. Once I hit 5 years old, everything went downhill for several years until I turned 12 and puberty kicked in. I was incredibly skinny and dorky looking, with huge glasses, unruly hair, and really crooked teeth. Puberty helped me fill out, my contacts and braces got into play, and so did my hair gel. As I got older, I got, quote, better looking. Lord only knows how I'll look in another decade or so, but I'm glad my 7-year awkward phase ended when it did. Oh listen honey, we knew when you were 2, it just got worse from there. We're thrilled you grew up and could post on the internet, but let's face it, you aren't going to be in an Abercrombie ad anytime soon. Stay strong though. My best friend growing up was one of those unfortunate, at least in our society, souls. She was short, about 5'1", and very obese for a kid. In grade 5, she was probably pushing around 200 pounds and wore a 42-inch waist men's jeans. She had a jutting brow ridge, a blade-like nose, and horrible teeth. She was so buck-toothed, they met in an almost right angle in the center of her mouth, kind of like a cow catcher on the front of trains. In order to fix her teeth, they'd have to break her jaw in a bunch of places. She couldn't chew with her mouth closed, so it was awful listening to her eat, especially chips. She hated her teeth so much that she never cared for them, and they basically rotted out of her mouth. She had very fine, very curly hair that was so thin you could see her scalp, and even though she was a bigger girl, she had small, pointy mammary glands. Everyone called her Roseanne, but Roseanne was prettier. It was terrible. Her parents spoiled her and bought her whatever she wanted, maybe in part because they felt guilty. Because her teeth were so bad, about 3 or 4 years ago she had to have them all taken out and got dentures. They completely changed the shape of her face. When you have bad teeth, it seems counterintuitive, but it hurts less to eat soft, sugary stuff than it does to eat healthy food. She lost a ton of weight because it no longer hurt to eat healthy, and she was no longer afraid to smile. She looks like a completely different person now. Of course, she was always beautiful on the inside, but now she feels that way too. It's kind of a crappy moral to this story. You know, she was ugly her whole life, but now she's beautiful. But now she's happy and that's all that matters. She has 2 great kids, work that she loves, tons of family and friends who adore her, and these were all things she had before she became pretty. The best thing about the most beautiful child on earth is that every mother gives birth to it. Kids are all ugly at one point in growing up or another. Usually they grow into it or at least out of the weird features. You know, ears too big for the head, smushed up beak nose. Usually it kind of evens out over time and most kids look fairly decent. As parents, the best thing we can do is encourage hairstyles that fit the facial shape and complement existing structures. We teach them how to dress for what styles of clothing look good on them, and teach them good personal grooming habits to maximize all the natural traits they have that are good. I'm lucky. I bred with someone with a significantly different regional racial makeup than I had, so rather than amplifying my strong traits, the kids ended up having a lot of mine and hers in toned-down versions that look better than me or her. And we're far from ugly to begin with. I'll be interested in seeing how they look as adults. So far, so good. I was an ugly baby and there was no getting around it, my mother said. I came out breech birth and the doctor grabbed me by the eyes to haul my head out. Cue 2 black eyes that crossed and a beat-up face for the first few weeks of my pitiful existence. After that, she says I straightened out and looked more towards normal, but she said even my other doctors, I was sick and homely, couldn't find nice things to say about my looks. She's like 3 now, and it's like, well, I'll love them no matter what. My son was cute when he was born, but my daughter, good God, she was born covered in black hair and had a wine stain over her eye, and her face was horribly swollen. She looked like Don Rickles. It was just awful. Thankfully, she's adorable now. Sometimes you just have to wait it out. I was the ugly child and relentlessly bullied because of it. I'm the swan now. Braces, a developed chest, and a decent haircut work wonders. For any parents out there wondering about their ugly kids' futures, I was frickin' hideous between the ages of about 7 and 16. But then I sort of grew into my features. I learned how to style myself, do my makeup to suit me. I still have a very prominent nose, but it hasn't stopped me from getting boyfriends or fun bedroom times. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.